Audio. Here we go. Bon après-midi à tous. Let's just fix that. What's going on? Oh, I can't. Bon après-midi à tous et bienvenue à l'audience du Comité de dérogation pour la Ville d'Ottawa. Welcome everyone to the Committee of Adjustment hearing for the City of Ottawa. We are a quasi-judicial tribunal for the City of Ottawa, and we hold public hearings on Planning Act applications. The ones that we are authorized to hear are mostly minor variances and consents, but we also hear permissions and a few other types. So our hearings, as you can see, we're all back to being in person. That said, there is the ability to participate remotely, and you only need to speak with committee staff about getting registered for that to happen. That's for future reference, more or less. You are being live streamed on YouTube with the video, and the video will be archived on our website along with the agenda for today. So my name is Anne Tremblay, and I will be chairing today's hearing. With me are my fellow panel members, Member Lecueillier, Member Peklikin, and online we have Member Blatherwick. So in terms of the procedures, you all saw the agenda at the beginning of the hearing. Those are literally put in the order of first in the door and put onto the agenda. We have the discretion to move some of those things around, and we will be doing that today. So just note that panel members have a chance to start reviewing the file information long in advance of this meeting. And we also have a chance to pre-meet and get any additional information just prior to the hearing. So we do have and have had a chance to review a lot of the material that has been submitted. So what we really want to hear from today, in addition though, is any submissions that are either in support or in opposition that is not part of the material that we have. That said, of course, you're welcome to present what you would like to the committee. So as part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property in question. It's the Planning Act regulation. And if there is no statutory declaration confirming that that sign has been posted, then we can always do an affirmation or an oath verbally today. Without either, however, the application can't proceed. So how we tend to operate is we have adjournments that we deal with first, or any withdrawals, which we have one of each today, so we'll talk about. Then we go on to what's called the unopposed applications, which are fairly straightforward. And I believe the criteria was provided in one of the slides at the beginning. So from there, then we then triage the remainder of the applications, normally based on the controversy or the number of people who want to speak to that. And that's where I'm saying there's some discretion about the order. So in some cases, we may ask you to present and may just ask you questions. Now in the latter, I think what we're going to gravitate towards is to ask for presentations more frequently, and then just on very simple matters, could we then just go to questions? So so be prepared. If you've got an item today, you will, and you're not on the unopposed, you will likely have to do a presentation. So then the committee gets a chance to ask questions for clarification, either of the agent or the applicant or of staff, and then we go to the public portion, and I normally start with the speakers list, and from there, and if there's, do a general call out to see if there's anybody either here in person or online who also wants to address the committee. So in all cases, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send an official written decision and the reasons for it to all parties, participants, and anyone who has requested a copy of the decision. So that's how we will proceed today. We have a number of matters of business. So the first is there anyone on this panel that has a conflict of interest either with any of the items that are on our agenda or the agendas of panel 2 or 3? Anyone?
No.
All right, not for the record, not seeing any declarations of conflict of interest. We also have minutes of January 15th, I believe, to confirm. Are they on there? No, we don't actually have them here. We're going to reserve them for the next meeting to confirm. Okay, all right, let's do that. And then we have a withdrawal request. My understanding is that the agent is not with us today. It's for number 12, 191 Granville Street. So I don't believe we need to vote on that. We can simply record that the application is in fact withdrawn at this point from the agenda. All right, so with that, then we're going to go to the adjournment requests, and we have one for number 9, 60 Hampton Avenue, looking for the agents on this application. Are you online or are you in person? Looks you're online.
Madam Chair, the agent is not attending for this one. It would be a sine die adjournment.
Oh, all right, thank you for that reminder. So given that the agent isn't here, we don't need to go to that part. But before we adjourn, I do need to make a call out. Is there anyone who would have a concern about or wants to speak to the adjournment sine die for number 9, which is 60 Hampton? Now's your chance. All right, seeing none, then vote from the committee. All those in favor of the adjournment? Oh, excuse me, pardon me. All right, so for the record, it's unanimous. The application number 9, 60 Hampton is adjourned, sine die. Perfect. Okay, so then the next place for us to go is on the unopposed. On this, I do not need the agents to come forward. So we have application number 2, 451 Roosevelt, number 4, oh, sorry, my mistake. I'm looking at the wrong ones. Number 1, 328 MacKay Street, number 5, 236 Lebreton Street, number 7, 5153 Gordon Street, and number 8, 62 Columbus Avenue. So for those, we're not asking any presentation, we're not asking any questions. We have it's fairly straightforward. Before we go to a vote on these applications, is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak either for or against any one of those 4 applications? Sorry, not seeing anybody come forward. So all those, so for the panel, oh, sorry, Ms. O'Connor, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just note that planning staff had a note to make in regards to the application at 62 Columbus. It wasn't necessarily a concern, but I'm just wondering, is my colleague Penelope there in person?
Yes, Miss, yes.
Yeah, she has a note just to make to the applicant and the committee to put on the record.
All right, so with that then, Ms. Horn, if you wouldn't mind just reading what it is that we need to add for the approval.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Essentially, we just wanted to flag upon further review. We know that there is an illegal parking pad or an unauthorized parking pad on the 62 Columbus frontage. It's staff's opinion that it should be removed, and we just wanted to let the applicant know that until the parking pad has been removed, the city will continue to hold securities related to the right-of-way application.
All right, thank you, Ms. Horn. I think at this point we need to hear from Mr. Price just to see if there's agreement.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yes, it was brought to our attention through this easement application that there are some issues with right-of-way management, and we've already begun working with right-of-way to have those rectified this spring once the snow goes. So we're aware of it, and we are working with staff.
All right, just to be clear, you're in support of what planning staff is requiring.
I missed, to be honest with you, Madam Chair, I did miss the last few seconds as they were bringing me in as a panelist online. So if we could, sorry to make you do it again, Penelope, but if you could just confirm, just so I hear it correctly.
Yeah, Ms. Horn, can you please read that again for the benefit of Mr. Price?
Of course, Madam Chair. Essentially, it's just a comment. We wanted to bring it to the committee's attention and the applicant's attention, just so that it's on the record. It would not be a condition.
All right, so I need to just get from you on the record, Mr. Price, that you are in agreement.
Yes, ma'am. I am in agreement.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so not having heard from anyone on any of these applications, then I certainly don't have anybody on a speaker's list. With that, then I think the panel can make a decision. So all those in favor of all 4 applications? All right, so for the record, it's unanimous. All of those applications are granted. All right, so we're going to go to number 2, 451 Roosevelt next. Looking for Mr. Freeman or Mr. Casagrande, and we will be requiring a presentation. Mr. Casagrande.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of committee. Thomas Freeman should be joining online. There he is. So Thomas, we have a slideshow that was sent in. I can walk you through that, and if I need some help from Thomas, I'll ask him to pitch in. Next slide, please. So there's a subject property. It's at the corner southeast corner of Ravenhill and Roosevelt. Next slide. And so what this slide is illustrating, Madam Chair, members of committee, is what we have is an existing dwelling that's basically at the corner of these 2 properties. That existing dwelling goes beyond the required setbacks from both street fronts. In fact, its eaves project beyond the property line into the city's right-of-way. And so our approach to this file has been attempting to maintain those existing non-complying rights. And the way basically Section 3 of the zoning bylaws works is that you have the ability to strike an average effectively between the existing and the required zoning requirements. And so in looking at this, unless of course you're building to the original footprint that was already there, you can build to that as of right, and that's a recognized right under the Planning Act established through Ontario Land Tribunal hearings and whatnot. So the long and the short of this is, if this building was built slightly lower, which is illustrated by that red box roughly, it wouldn't need any variances at all. And so the client doesn't want to build a new 2-story semi-detached with substandard ceiling to floor heights. He also wants to seek the opportunity for assisted or for secondary dwelling units in the basement. And so both of those are dictating that the building really should be slightly taller, which forces us to seek the variances that are required. But it's really as it relates to that upper portion of the building only. And so if I can move to the next slide, I'm not sure what else there is, but, so we get into the Planning Act criteria. It's a severance application, so we have our planning rationale on record, which really does detail how these tests have been met. If I can move to the next slide. We did take the opportunity, you recall last time I might have been before you, Madam Chair, I didn't have this image. I made sure we have it this time, and it really does show the lot fabric in the community. I'll remind the committee that this property was actually the subject of a severance approval previously, but that's been effectively extinguished now. So this lot that's proposed, although it's very close to the lot fabric, it's pretty much identical to what was proposed before, but there was overlapping stratified elements to the previous consent that made it a little more complicated and certainly difficult to build. Next slide, please. So we get into the minor variances now. Test 1, do the variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? And I would say the answer to that is yes. They're permitting an urban pattern of built form that accommodates low-rise housing options within the neighborhood designation. Next slide. Do the proposed variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? And so the requested variances permit an urban pattern of built form that accommodates low-rise housing options. And it is reflective again of that section 3 of the zoning bylaw that would otherwise permit what's proposed aside from the extra height. Next slide, please. Are the proposed variances minor in nature? And so the proposed front corner side yard setbacks represent an existing building condition that's already there for the most part. It's consistent with the urban pattern of built form. The proposed variances allow for the modern redevelopment of an existing built form condition, which, while modestly taller, will represent an improved interface in our view with the public realm. The variances are therefore minor with respect to the impact on the public realm and the surrounding neighborhood. And finally, are the proposed variances desirable for the appropriate development and use of the land? It's our view that they are. They facilitate the development of a functional semi-detached building in a manner that's desirable for the use of the land. The proposed development does not detract from the neighborhood character or the experience at the street. The proposed design allows for a positive relationship between the public realm and the front facade of the building with front-facing doors and windows. And I'll state that there's also an opportunity for us to enhance and preserve most of the existing mature vegetation to the front and the rear of the property. That is all, Madam Chair.
All right, so before I open up questions to the remainder of the panel members, I did notice there's a discrepancy in the notice itself, notice of a hearing.
Okay.
So this is a housekeeping matter, but we do need to be clear on what it needs to read. So the initial R plan that I saw as part of your submission had a part 3 and 4. And in the notice, under requested variances, it very clearly says 396 Raven Hill, parts 1, 3, and 4. If you look at the consent required description, it talks about the severed land being part 1 only. So we need to either add 3 and 4 under that description or strike 3 and 4 under the requested variances.
Understood. I'm going to ask Thomas, I think he has his hand up, which I'm glad to see. So maybe Thomas, you can understand this a bit better.
Go ahead, please.
I think that may have been a clerical error on carry forward from the previous R plan that was proposed that did show an easement for parking. That was removed based on discussions with staff, and the new R plan was submitted being parts 1 and 2 only. So that should read parts 1 and 2, not 3 and 4.
All right, so for the record, we're striking under requested variances the reference to 3 and 4, just so that we have consistency and that it's aligned with the proposal. So thank you, Mr. Freeman, for that clarification. Okay, with that, then I'm going to open it up to the panel members for questions. Anyone? All right, I do have some questions on Mr. Casagrande. Can we see that lotting plan again? Just so that we can get a sense of the remainder of the fabric. I know it was part of your presentation, but do you have a table somewhere that actually summarizes the lot frontage and lot area of the surrounding properties?
No, Madam Chair, we didn't go to that extent. Maybe, is that Thomas? Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
There is a table in our planning rationale. I'll note that the lot width and the lot area are compliant with the zoning provisions for the zone and the exception. So we're not requesting a variance for that, the lot width or area. It's related to the built form.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I was just trying to get a sense of how, what the fit would be within that, from a planning standpoint, just what the fit would be within that neighborhood. Can you also tell me a little bit about the public consultation? Because as you know, there are some, there's, letters of opposition, I believe, a number of letters of opposition that have come in on this. Can you tell me a little bit about your, because we will go to the public portion next. Can you tell me a little bit about your public consultation on this, please?
Madam Chair, we didn't undertake any unique public consultation on this. I think the reason for that is because the nature of this application and its history is such that it's not substantially deviating from the previously approved application, other than that they're effectively building something new, whereas opposed before they were trying to renovate the existing building. From our perspective, that existing building, I don't know if we have images of our planning rationale, but it's not the most handsome structure, I'll say, and it's certainly aged. And so, our view of this approach is it's actually a pretty drastic improvement on the existing condition and not entirely dissimilar from the last application, which I don't recall having raised any significant public concerns. We've also worked closely with staff, as I mentioned, to try and preserve existing mature vegetation and take a parking approach to the rear of the property that's going to allow for enhanced buffering. So all of these things did not, to us, scream, yes, you should be talking with the neighbors or having a unique public meeting. So we didn't.
Just on a clarification then, so in terms of the number of units, the existing number of units, just give me that number, the existing number of units on the site and I think it's 6 that's in total proposed, correct?
Yes, that's what's proposed. I cannot recall, maybe Thomas can, whether there's more than just the 2 units, the 2 principal units, whether they have secondary dwellings. I can't recall, Madam Chair. But I guess what I'd say is that the total square footage of the buildings are not dramatically different either. So whether you've got, larger families in the existing building versus the new that'll have maybe smaller but more units, it's a comparable scenario in my view, I guess is what I'm saying.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, back to members. Any questions? Yes, Member Blatherwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Either Mr. Freeman or Mr. Casagrande, I'm looking at your report, page 16, when you're discussing elements of the Westboro Development Overlay, and in particular, the one on parking. And I'll just read you off the quote from the Westboro Development Overlay. Front yard and corner side yard must be equipped with solid permanent fixtures sufficient to prevent motor vehicle parking in contravention of this bylaw. And in response to this, you have stated that 2 trees are proposed to be planted in the front yard. In your estimation, do those 2 trees planted in the front yard have the same effect as solid permanent fixtures sufficient to prevent parking?
I guess what I say, Mr. Blatherwick, is a very dense fabric that we're proposing with these 2 lots. So when you factor in the proposed plantings, the walkways that you can see on the plan, if we were to bring it back up, there's not, in our view, a realistic opportunity for this front yard to get littered with cars, which is the goal and the objective. But we're certainly happy to work with planning staff to try and make sure that those plantings are done in the most strategic way possible, because that's definitely not the intent for our client.
Okay, other questions? Member Dickey.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, wanted to ask the agent, so the last application, I'm glad you said strata, because then that sparked my memory from the previous application that was before us, because it was rather unique. Can you just recap what was the reason for the change of kind of the previous one to this one? I think you mentioned it a bit in your presentation, but if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, please.
My understanding from discussions with the client is that when he started to evaluate the economics, if you will, of this project with doing that renovation, maintaining this stratified situation, it started to tell him basically that it made more sense to just take this building down and rebuild something new that was going to be, properly done in all aspects from the beginning to the end. And to be quite honest, has the ability to be then conveyed to future landowners in the future where, that other one had more complications, let's say.
And as a follow-up then, so the way the development is proposed is you're maintaining the existing envelope and creating an addition. Why wouldn't you just completely break it all down and then we wouldn't have all of these little variance, non-compliance issues. Like, can you just explain a little bit about why you chose this particular design?
So I guess the design started with trying to avoid any minor variances whatsoever, right? And so staff appropriately flagged to us that while we were working within the permitted building footprint, what happens when you have an existing building that's only so tall in that footprint is that you can't say those rights keep going up, okay? So that upper threshold of a meter or so on the concept plan was the problem. So our client was faced with making a shorter building or seeking variances, pretending that these site-specific permissions from the non-complying use and setbacks weren't there. So we've approached it seeking variances as if we never had that, but our rationale before this committee is that in the absence of these variances, we could build everything except that upper 1 meter element. Does that make sense? And I should actually say further that they could have approached the upper red element by stepping it back further till a point where it reached its setback, because this building is permitted to be that high. It's just not permitted to be that high and that close to the street, only within the lower element. Do you follow? Okay.
So then, just so I'm completely clear, you chose to maintain the same building envelope within considering the economics of the design, instead of completely demolishing, like I've seen in other applications before us, moving the building away from, so there wouldn't be any minor variances. In order for you to achieve the number of units that you're trying to create here, this is kind of what you had to come up with. Is that kind of a recap of my understanding?
I guess what I would say is this development could likely have achieved the same square footage and the same number of units if it was just that much shorter. Okay, because again, it's a takedown and it's a rebuild, but it's rebuilding within the permitted envelope that was established when it was built, however number of years ago. So they could have rebuilt within that framework. They could have had the same number of stories below grade and above grade, but you'd have ceiling to floor heights that were really substandard, 7.5, maybe 8 feet if they're lucky. And so that's not typical of modern construction. And so the approach was, let's do this building properly and let's get variances to allow us to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Just one other question then for you. The one thing we didn't see an awful lot of evidence from you, Mr. Casagrande, has to do with the corner site triangle. So the site triangle requirements are 6 by 6 meters. Typically, they're there for a reason. They're there to ensure that there's safety in traffic circulation in that area. Can you just give me some planning rationale for reducing it to 1.3 on one side and 0 on the other? And how it addresses, and how will traffic safety continue to be present in those conditions?
So again, Ms. Tremblay, I guess our rationale for it is that's an existing condition that's functioning to this day. And so as I think the committee would recognize, this is a fairly urban area and becoming more urban every day in Westboro, right? And so when we drive these types of streets, they're narrower roads, they're more full of traffic, and so people naturally adjust and drive slower. There's a further adjustment knowing when there's a specific constraint to any visibility that exists presently. And that's the same in any neighborhood. So you might have a particular corner in a neighborhood that has a hedge that doesn't allow you to see properly. So you slow down and you proceed carefully. We're not introducing a new element, in other words, that this corner doesn't have today. And so from our perspective, it can't be said to be aggravating an existing problem. And therefore, from my perspective, and I'm not a transportation engineer, but I work with them enough, they would say that this establishes driver habits, and those habits are going to ensure that safety is not an issue.
I think I've heard that too, that kind of explanation. So thank you for that. I just want to get on the record because I think we kind of glossed over that one a little bit, and I want to make sure that we have that information.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. Any other questions from our panel before I go to the public? I have somebody on my list. All right, so looking for Hani Havez. Online or in person? I guess online. Okay, we'll just wait for a moment. Good afternoon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. It's not, we can see you and we can hear you. So that's two thumbs up.
Okay, great.
so-
Sorry, it says Audrey there, I believe, but that's because my daughter was using my iPad at one point. So apologize for the confusion.
No worries at all. You do have 5 minutes. So the floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing me out. I will try to be as brief as possible. Just for some quick context on my perspective, I am a neighbor of this property. I've been here for many years, so I've experienced all the infills and new zoning changes that have come along, and I do have some things to say. So first, just to answer some questions that the panel may have asked. So as far as parking, there is no parking permitted on the Roosevelt side of this building. I don't know what effect that has to the panel's questions, but that's one point. And also along the and also along the Ravenhill corner of the property, there's also no parking permitted, I believe. So no parking is permitted on the boundary of the applicant's property. The existing dwelling there right now has 2 small units, each with, I think, 2 or 3 bedrooms. So it was, a rental on both sides, and it'd usually be about 2 or 3 residents per unit. Okay, so I just want to ask this one question about how much parking is on the proposal. To me, it looks like there's 2 parking spots. I just wanted to confirm if that's the case quickly.
So is it possible to finish a presentation, then we'll get some of those questions answered?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess then the other points that I want to raise is with regard to how much parking is on lot for this proposal. So if there are 3 units per dwelling, so a total of 6 units, that could be up to 6, maybe if there's 2 parking spots required per unit, up to 12 additional parking spots that this application will need, this I guess location. Because of the number of, in recent years, multi-unit dwellings that have come up literally across the street, there's probably about 10 new units with multi-dwellings on each, 12 new properties with multi-dwellings on each unit. There's been a huge number of cars looking to park around this area. And this area of Roosevelt is basically a throughway. There's lots of car traffic here. There's also a church, maybe 100 meters from the property, that has a preschool, and there's constantly people trying to park on Roosevelt, looking for spots, and they're all circling around. They're parking illegally. They're idling. And if now we're looking at up to 10 new cars looking for on-street parking, either in the evening or throughout the day, I'm worried that there won't be enough, and we'll just have this problem perpetuate, be even worse. More so, Roosevelt is a common spot for school buses, kids walking to and from school all the time. Cars always racing up and down that street to begin with, and now there's more cars coming around looking for parking. That could cause further issues. As far as the property being right on the corner, again, Roosevelt has lots of cars speeding up and down. Having the building be right on the as close to the corner as possible is, my opinion, not a good thing. We're just causing, I know it's the problem exists now, but if we can solve it now, I would love to see that. Yeah, it's mostly just the safety concerns and just how many cars are constantly around this area. And my last question though is, I'm wondering why it's listed as 2 single family dwellings with 2 SDUs each. I don't know what the reasoning why. I just don't understand, I guess, how this all works, but why aren't these multi-dwelling units to begin with instead of single families with 2 SDUs each? So that's the end of what I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hafez.
Hafez, yeah, you got it.
Okay. I can answer the second one. So under provincial law today, every single family dwelling has the right to 2 additional units within it as of right. So, and they're not considered apartment buildings under that. They're just considered an intensification of a single family, principal single family use. So that explains that. But to get back to, I think the matter that you spoke to at length there, I think, as part of your presentation, is the parking and the safety impacts that might have. So I want to turn to Ms. King, just to get from Ms. King, what are the parking requirements for this development?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this property is located in Area X. So as per Section 101, subsection 3A, a parking space is not required for the first 12 units. However, I believe the applicant has provided 1 parking space for the overall development, but I will defer to Mr. Freeman or Mr. Casagrande to elaborate further on that if the committee requires.
All right, thank you, Ms. King. I was just wanted to make sure that we had what the bylaw suggests for Mr. Hafez, and then I can, Mr. Casagrande, if you'd like to elaborate on how you see the impacts to traffic safety.
Yeah, so relative to what we're just discussing, Ms. King's right. It's basically 1 parking space is proposed for this development. As I noted earlier, this is, an increasingly urban area. There's transit stations that are not, that Dominion Station as well as Westboro that are close enough by, that we're seeing more and more development without parking, and that's in accordance with the city's policy direction. So I think that should address, sorry, I missed the speaker's name, but I think it should address his concerns. And then with respect to the corner site triangle, the one thing I want to note, and Thomas may have the exact dimension, but the building's not right at the corner, right? So there is a setback from Roosevelt. So it's it's not a scenario where you're completely covering the corner site triangle, even though it is reflective of the existing condition.
Just to be clear, the minor variance being sought is specifically reflects the existing condition, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, is there anyone else? Oh, Ms. Lecky, go ahead, please.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just so we're clear, I'm looking on page 15 of your application package, and it states that there is 1 space per primary dwelling unit with 2 spaces total. When I look at the figure 6 on the proposed site plan, it looks like it's just 1 very long driveway. Maybe it's a kind of a tandem. So if you just clarify, is it 1 or 2 spots?
Yes, and sorry for the confusion with this. So when we originally submitted There was a variance to eliminate or not eliminate, reduce the rear buffering requirement to allow for side-by-side driveways, one for each unit. But in discussions with staff, there was clear that their preference was to maintain that buffer. And basically that dictated the only option really was to go with one driveway. And so our rationale didn't get updated, but we provided a cover letter to explain the change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'm a little confused. So is the proposal here then for, and we've seen this, of course, in Sandy Hill on a number of occasions, is the proposal then for a tandem parking space?
It's not for a tandem space, it's for one space that would lead to the lot that's adjacent to Ravenhill. So the outer lot will have one driveway that basically slides right in behind the dwelling. Does that make sense?
All right, thanks for that. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to go to the next speaker. Is there anyone either in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? Good afternoon, Mr. Gray.
Hello. It's Tim Gray with the Westboro Community Association. One of the things I kind of want to say right off the top is that this is a project that really could have benefited from consultation right out of the gate. You know, once that the project that was the stratified project was, you know, couldn't happen, then they there was a deal that could have been made, I believe, because I've talked with the neighbors and, you know, they have some concerns. But the other thing I want to say from my point of view is that I really wish they had have addressed the as of right situation a little better in their presentation, because you know, I'm not a planner or an expert or anything. I'm just a Joe, and I understand the as of right, but the as of right for a building footprint, I don't think is all that common. And I'm not saying that that doesn't apply here, but it really put a lot of confusion in for me, and I think some of the neighbors. You know, why are they being allowed to, you know, knock the building down and build right in the exact same place? Because Westboro, we see that every day. Buildings get knocked down and two semi-detached units come up. Why is this so special? And from my point of view, I didn't know that they could do that, but now I'm worried. Okay, I'm worried. So, I mean, I don't know what to say other than, you know, I respect the fact that, you know, I got to believe them, but there could have been a better situation if they had have approached us and say, okay, let's talk. You know, we're not asking for a 4.5 meter setback on Ravenhill, but maybe 1.5. And that is kind of the lowest, you know, you could go. And maybe if you do that, then, you know, the height, you know, there is some provisions in the Westboro infill study that increases height on corner lots. So, you know, we could have worked with that. But, and you know, I know they're concerned about, you know, saving the trees. But when I looked at the property, the trees that they're considering saving are pretty crappy. And so it could have been a situation where, okay, forget those trees, but what can you plant instead of those trees? So the other concern, and I know this really kind of, you know, it's hard to address, but Roosevelt is a busy street. It really, really is. And it's a street that the community feels is ideal for more active transportation. It's got a direct connection to Dovercourt Community Center. And Ravenhill, or Churchill Public School is just up the hill there. There's a stairway that comes right down from Churchill Elementary School down onto Ravenhill. So there's not thousands of students that are using that stairway, but there are some, and it's a way to promote kids from, to walk to and from school in a safe way. So that's where that site triangle it's kind of important to us. And I'm not saying it needs to be 6 meters by 6 meters, but if it was 3 meters by 3 meters or 2 meters by 3 meters or something like that, it just is a reassurance that these things are be taken seriously. And I get it, I believe him. He's got a right to do that. But from talking with the neighbors, they want to see this project go ahead. They really do, because they're sick of the building, sitting there vacant and all, So it was just a prime opportunity for some real consultation. And I talk to developers all the time. I get the money issue. I really do. I understand it's not all about the community. It's about making money. And that's okay. I get it.
All right, so if I can just recap your comments then, Mr. Gray, because I am going to ask Mr. Casagrande to respond. I think what you're asking is, why in this case are we rebuilding on a foundation that where we have an opportunity to demolish and do something that will allow for greater safety to be introduced at the corner of that property? Is that about right?
Yeah, and generally a better a plan. I'm not going to say, you have to build a 8-unit low-rise apartment or whatever. I'm not starting from there. And I'm also not saying that like I said before, we have to have all those setbacks exact. It's not like that. They could have come up with a plan that worked for everybody. You give us this thing, the site triangle, and we're more than happy to reduce the other side yard or whatever, work with them and
Well, thank you for reminding me, because you did start with that comment about the fact that there wasn't any consultation, and that would have been information that the agent and the applicants would have had from the outset. So Mr. Casagrande, I'm going to ask you to respond to that. And I guess it's going back a bit to what Member de Cuyer was raising is, given that we do have some of those high traffic volume issues, did you look at other scenarios, other designs for the site that would have maybe not eliminated the need for some of these variances, but maybe reduced them in order to improve the situation from what's existing?
We did, Madam Chair. I think, when we work on files like this, we take a huge lead from city staff. So we started with the premise of looking at finding ways to provide parking in the rear and provide a smaller rear yard buffer. We thought we could augment what was there and still achieve that objective. Excuse me, that became a very rigid discussion. Staff just were not going to be prepared to support this application because of what the Westboro overlay objectives were. We also had a lot of discussions with staff and their forestry staff about those trees, which I acknowledge we also felt weren't the most, glowing examples of mature vegetation, but nonetheless, the ones along the shared southern property line. And that became a very rigid discussion. And so all of these things were basically telling us that, we should do what we can to keep our building as close to our as of right as we possibly can. And in doing so, staff became immediately supportive of the minor variances. I guess what I'd say to Mr. Gray, and I appreciate him being here, and I'll certainly, I guess take this to heart for the next application I'm doing in this area. I think in general, like this application was adjourned from the first version. Nobody reached out to us. From our perspective, up until like a day or two ago, we were of the view that this was a pretty benign application. And the last thing I'll say is relative to that corner, that was never raised to us even from staff as an area of crisis or concern relative to safety. So, we're looking again at an as of right status quo condition that is just basically being modernized here.
I think Mr. Gray's point is you would have learned about some of those concerns had there been a closer consultation with them, but I think you've taken it under advisement that, you're going to seek to do maybe that in the future in looking at an application in this area. Okay.
Can I
so
just say why we didn't reach out on the original
you've got a minute.
application?
You got a
No, it
minute,
won't
Mr.
even
Gray.
take, it was just because we saw that as a clear as of right. They were always talking about, keeping the building totally, and doing this major renovation on it. There was, getting into the stratified thing. That to me, and again, I'm just a layman, that is a clear as of right, and so that's I think the community and certainly myself and the way I presented it to our board is that, hey, they've got every right to do that and we can't ask for any. That's why we didn't reach out.
I understand. So there's a qualitative difference from the community standpoint. Go
Can I
ahead,
just
Mr.
clarify,
Casagrande.
sorry, Ms. Tremblay, just for Mr. Gray's benefit, I wasn't referring to the application from a year or two ago. I was referring to the fact that our first version of this, which went in, and then we had to seek an adjournment to go and re-look at some of the variances that were being sought. This building footprint, I don't think changed at all from the original submission. It was simply what was going on in the rear yard. So my point is it's been in the system, if you will, for, I don't know, roughly 3 months, and we haven't heard anything until now.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Casagrande. Okay, with that, I'm going to go on to the next speaker. Is there anyone online or in person? Yeah, come on down, please. Good afternoon. I'm going to need your name and your municipal address, please.
My name is Karen Johnson, and I submitted one of the letters for, with regard to this application, and I live at 431 Roosevelt. Mr. Casagrande and I are acquainted from when I was on the Westboro Community Association Planning Committee, and I know that he speaks much more planning speak than I, so I would just like to make a few comments about my impression as a neighbor of the subject property. You have my comments in my letter, so I won't repeat those. I now understand some of the aspects of this application, which was not apparent to me in multiple iterations of the prior applications, which speaks a bit to some of the neighbors' confusions with applications morphing over a number of years. But the comment I wanted to add to this now was, having seen the drawings, having heard Mr. Casagrande's description of what's going up there, I do have a question about stormwater management, and I can't recall, I didn't read all of staff's comments, which went on several days before I had to submit my letter, but I wondered if they have looked at the massing on this new proposal. The I'm not understanding the parking pad plus access to the parking pad. To what extent is the stormwater on this property going to be managed on the property? We have a good deal of problems with flooding on that block already due to pretty well losing all our trees on Golden, Ravenhill, Roosevelt, Byron block. And that's kitty corner from where this is. So kind of looking at stormwater and where that might go. Is that a legitimate question for this setting?
Yes, it is. We can certainly get some clarification. We do have conditions of approval that would do address grading and drainage, so all of that does have to be. But I'm going to let, is it Ms. King, just explain that a little bit further from the city's perspective.
Yep, so you are correct, Madam Chair, that we have requested a grading and drainage plan, so that will ensure that grading and drainage isn't being directed onto the other properties. It's self-contained within that property. Committee understands that conditions, but we have not requested a condition for a stormwater management brief because we don't see any concerns in this area. This isn't like, for example, the City View area where we know that there are common issues in that area, but in this case of this application, the city has no concerns, and hopefully the condition for grading and drainage will resolve any concerns depending on what the applicant does propose.
Thank you, Ms. King. And for Ms. Johnson's benefit, can you confirm that as part of the technical circulation of the application that the infrastructure folks get a chance to comment, review and comment?
100%. They did review and comment. They provided comments as well as the conditions with the application.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure that that technical side had been covered off. So I hope that responds to your concern.
It does. And may I make a clarification on the traffic situation and update it, given that this application is perhaps not responding to the current circumstances of traffic on Roosevelt?
Sorry, what?
I just wanted to
not clear.
provide some additional information that I have been working with Councillor Leaper's office for yet a second wave of traffic calming, and we should be seeing that this spring, that there'll be at least some impermanent traffic calming on top of what we have, that this has been identified as a problem corner, and to that I speak Roosevelt, Danforth, Lower Byron, that is the 1 block away from the subject property. So this is a problem area. There is cut through from Carling, and the circling from looking for shopping spots and such is that it's dangerous. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments today. Ms. Johnson, if no panel members have any questions for you, we'll go on to a next speaker. If there's anyone else who would like to address the committee, either here today or online. Anyone? No. Okay. Well, then that completes our public portion of the of this hearing on this application. So, Mr. Casagrande, you have 2 or 3 minutes to recap, if you'd like.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I don't really have much other than to say, I mean, I think my evidence has been consistent that we've worked with staff. We've responded to what concerns we've heard. This is basically a reinterpretation of an as of right condition. You know, relative to the tests that I think the committee, must focus on, we satisfy the consent application tests and the minor variance tests as I've gone through those 4 tests. So really, I'd be remiss to find one where we're not meeting those tests. So, while I respect the comments and concerns that are made from the public, I think based on everything that we've had to respond to and our focus on the Planning Act criteria, this is an application that represents good planning.
All right, so just 2 things, Mr. Casagrande. So I just want to hear from you then, from your professional planning standpoint, would you say then that this is, because planning, as you know, is inherently a conflict of interest and a conflict of priorities, right? So it's never a perfect world. But in your professional planning opinion, is this the best scenario for that neighborhood, the proposal you have?
Madam Chair, that's not per se the criteria that we're dealing with. So, at the end of the day, I'm charged with saying, is this good planning and does it meet the Planning Act tests? And the answer for me is absolutely. I think it's advancing all of the most important elements of the city's official plan and responding positively to the City of Ottawa's zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Grassman. That answer is fine. Last thing on the conditions, you've had a chance to look at them all?
Yes, we have, and we're fine with them.
Perfect. Okay. So that, I think, concludes this hearing. We're going to reserve, Mr. Casagrande, so you won't get that right now, but as you know, you do get the decision in due time. So 10 days.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Then we're going to move on to the next application. And in this case, I think we'd like to go to number 10, which is for 2476 Kaladar. So I think I'm looking for, who's our agent on that one? All right. Jadot, would that be correct, Mr. Jadot?
Mr. Judy.
Today, sorry about that. Okay.
No worries.
Okay, so we are going to request a brief presentation from you, please.
Absolutely. I did submit it. All right, so just starting off that this application is for two minor variances, lot width and lot area. Our particular zone is R3A. It requires a 9 meter frontage and a 270 square meter area. And in our particular case, we have 7.62 meter frontage and 232 square meters. And the reason why there's two applications is just both sides of the semi. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of context, bottom right subject area, that's the address 2476 Kaladar. Just north of that, you have Heron Road. Just east of that, you have Bank Street. That would be the major intersection. A little bit west of Heron Road, you have the Heron Bus Station. North of that, you have Billings Bridge. And then completely in the west on the other side of the river, you have Carleton University, just to give it a little bit of context. And this particular property is in Heron Park. Heron Park is divided by Heron Road. Both sides, both the south and the north, are R3A, except for the very top of Heron Park, which is a different zoning. Next slide, please. All right, so lot area. So this particular lot is essentially 15 by 30 square meters. 15 frontage, 30 depth. That would give you 465 square meters. Given that context divided in half, we're looking at 232, which is essentially all of Heron Park, very similar lot size. Next slide, please. All right, so so what we focused on in this application is other semi-detaches that do not conform to the zoning. So this is the south side of Heron. So everything in red are other semis. There are a lot of other properties, triplexes, and other multi-units that do not conform to the zoning and did require minor variances. But in our application, we're only focused on other semi-detaches that did require minor variances due to either frontage or lot area, and those two tend to be tied together. Next slide, please. This is just on the other side of Heron Road, also still Heron Park, still same zoning. All of these properties are more or less 50 by 100, very similar to our subject property, similar lot width, and they're all semis. So we're just focused on semis. Next slide, please. Okay, so in particular, our property here, just showing subject property. So I'm just going to be focusing on frontage, lot area. Those are the only two variances that we're in for today. Our lot area, sorry, our lot dimensions are 15.24 by 30.56. Two semi-detached. We are not applying for a minor variance application. It is the same owner that's going to be owning both sides of the semi in this particular case. That's why we do not have a consent application here today. But at the very bottom, just showing you the density, which is 1 unit per 232 square meters. That is the lot variance that we are asking for today. And all the subject properties afterwards are just going to be focusing on what the density is per lot. Next slide, please. Without going into too much detail, there are a lot where we pulled up 25 subject properties. Some of them are a mix of severed and unsevered properties. I won't go into too much detail on every single one of them, but I will briefly just explain. Subject number 1 is semi-detached, unsevered lot. The density is 1 unit per 232 square meters, which is similar to our particular subject property. Subject number 2, also same thing, unsevered semi-detached, same density. Number 3, this one is a severed semi-detached, very similar, 233 square meters. Keep in mind, we do require 270, so everything I'm explaining is below the 270. Everything's very similar to what we have. Subject number 4 is the other side of subject number 3, and that is 231 square meters. 5 is another one, a little bit bigger, 268. Subject number 6, 232 square meters. Next slide, please. Number 7, and again, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but if you look at subject 7 to 12 on this particular page, all these properties that we found, they're all semi-detaches between 232 down up to 268, and actually the last one is a long semi, it's a front to back semi, but it's still semi-detached, and that one is 1 unit per 154 square meters. Next slide, please. Again, more of the same. I won't go into more details, but you'll see a pattern. There's a lot of semi-detaches, a lot of square meters, without going into too much detail on every single particular property. We'll skip next slide. Same, next one.
Another two, you can take another 2 minutes. I
Okay.
prefer you finish your presentation.
All right. Again, these are all the same. I'll just go to the next one. The other one shows a summary. Next one, please. All right. So this shows us a summary of all the 25 properties that we did assess. Subject 0, our particular property is 1 unit per 232 square meters. If you look at just a summary between all the, from number 1 down to 25, you'll see everything from the lowest being 154 square meters. There's 3 properties there that have that. And then it goes up to like close to 268, 267 square meters. So there are, but on average, you just give general context, where our lot area is 232 square meters. The average of everything I'm showing is more or less the same. There's some that are a lot more dense, some that are a little bit less more dense. But just to give you context, these are just semi-detaches that do not conform in the same zoning, not including triplexes and other built forms that also require minor variances. We just focused on semi-detaches. And the next page shows you the 4 tests. I won't go through too much detail. I can, but or it could be brought up in part of the questions if need be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jude, for that presentation and for your detailed analysis on that. So that is a lot of evidence with regards to the densities in the area. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Member Lecuyer, go ahead, please.
Yes, I concur. I did appreciate all the examples. I'm wondering if maybe in your presentation or maybe committee staff have this, but we don't, in our packages anymore, we don't get the map of kind of where this is located. I saw a number of different street names. I didn't see any of them in Kaladar. Could we pull up at least a map so I can just see?
It would be page 2 of the presentation, please. I do apologize. I was trying to condense it as fast as I can. So, all right. So subject property bottom right, 2476 Kaladar. Now, Kaladar itself is facing a commercial. It's all commercial in front. There is no residential neighborhood in front of it. So it's actually at the very end of the neighborhood. On everything west of it is all residential. Everything east of it is commercial. And Kaladar is the first property right after Bank Street.
Can we see the I think the slide after this is
Sure.
the one that has it a little more zoomed in. Okay, maybe the next one. There was one where it had a bunch of street names. There we go.
But again,
Okay,
it's at the
well-
very, very right,
Yeah.
subject 0.
And so in your presentation, like the 1, 2, 3, the counting, that's what you did later on in your presentation.
Correct.
You were just recapping.
My
Okay.
apologies. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because sometimes before us, without putting this into context, you
Yes.
could be taking streets from one end everywhere. And I just want to see compared to the actual application at hand, which I believe is 0 here on this.
That is correct. So subject
Okay.
0 is the subject property.
Yeah.
This particular picture shows the south
Mhm.
side of Heron Road. So this is the south of Heron Park.
Yep.
And then the next one shows the north of
Mhm.
Heron Park. They're all the same zoning.
Yep.
They're all R3A, and same with our subject property.
Okay, thank you. That answers my
Excellent.
question.
All right, questions from other members on this? Okay, I guess we can go to the public portion. Now, on this application, I don't believe I have anyone registered. No, I don't. So is there anyone in the audience or anyone online who would like to speak to this application? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. So, Mr. Jude, you have 2 minutes to recap if you'd like.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. So just to recap, this particular property, we're asking for 2 minor variances, lot width, lot area. My background is engineering, so I do go a lot of detail, sometimes a little bit more than absolutely necessary, but I did provide a lot of evidence and existing examples showing the existing configuration and fabric of the neighborhood. I do know that the committee likes to see, plans and showing the overview of how the neighborhood currently looks like. So we did focus on just lot width, lot area. We do believe that these 2 minor variances are in fact minor and do concur with the existing fabric of the neighborhood and in line with the City of Ottawa policies, including the zoning bylaw.
All right, thank you. So I'm looking to the panel members whether or not we reserve on this one or make a decision. I think we can vote is what I think I'm seeing. So all those in favor? All right, so for the record, the application is unanimously granted. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation today.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Okay, so with that, we are going to go to, let's see, we did that was number 10. Let's do number 3. 137 Marquette, looking for Mr. Segreto.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members.
Good afternoon, Mr. Segreto. So I think we're going to be asking you for a presentation today. So the floor is yours. I don't think we have any housekeeping items or anything to take care of.
Can we go to the PowerPoint, please?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have in front of you here today is an application for minor variances. We're requesting 2 variances, one for height and one for rear yard setback. The property in question is a property, a single family dwelling, which is located at 137 Marquette in Vanier. It has a frontage of approximately 40 feet and a depth of approximately 101 feet. In this particular neighborhood, the zoning allows for low-rise apartment in the R4 UA zone. And what my clients would like to do is develop the property for an 8-unit low-rise apartment. There's a total of 2 one-bedroom units and 6 two-bedroom units. With respect to variance A, we're requesting to reduce the rear yard setback see here. We're asking for the rear setback to be reduced 25% of the lot depth, which is 7.83 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 30 meters, a lot depth of 9.21 meters. With saying that, we meet all the criteria of the landscaping at the rear yard. There's no parking required on this particular lot due to the fact that it is a lot that within the new zoning bylaw that does not require any parking, and the landscaping is there. And the reason why I'm asking for the rear yard setback is due to the fact that in order to create the 2-bedroom units at the rear of the property, I need some additional space, approximately 4 to 5 feet, to allow for 2 bedrooms at the back of the property, which are approximately 9 by 9, 9 by 10 feet, in order for this development to work out. The other variance that I'm requesting is the height. And with respect to the height, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so you can clearly see the 2 buildings on either side of us and then the proposed building. When you're looking at it, we get caught on the height due to the fact that the road is sloping towards one side, and at the back, it's sloping from front to back as well on the other side. So when you take the average grade of the height of this building, you get caught with a very small minor variance of approximately 450 centimeters, which is approximately the height of 2 large Tim Horton cups. And this is why we get caught with the height on this. In addition to that, if you look at the line in front, you'll see the average grade. That dark line in front is the average grade, and approximately a meter and a half, 2 meters, a meter and a half or so, 2 meters. You'll see that the sewers, the storm sewer and a sanitary sewer are very high. And this is another reason why we get caught with the height that we don't want to put a sump, not a sump system, but a pumping system into these things, because these things fail during electrical failures and whatever. So this is the other reason. So when you really look at it, the height is only on the one side, which again is about 17 inches or so that we're asking for relief on. So those are the two variances that I'm asking for. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the star indicates the subject property where we're at, and then all the other green and blue, you can clearly see that this particular neighborhood, with context, you can see that there's triplexes at 114, at 115, it looks like a triplex or a duplex there. If you look at 125 Marquette, you'll see some more units there, whether there's 6 units or multi-units there. At 120 Marquette as well, there's another multi-unit. And then as you go down further towards the right-hand side, you'll see 155 Marquette with a bunch of apartments there, and so on and so forth. So what we're proposing is no different than what is already there with respect to context. The other point that I'd like to make is with respect to, what was it, the height? What was it? I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. That is the subject property. As you can see, there's a hydro pole that we have to contend with. The existing tree that is in front, there's a crab tree, I believe, that will remain as is. We're not removing any trees at all. I believe we're adding 1 or 2 trees on this site. Next slide, please. That's the site plan. You can see tree number 1 is to remain, and there's a hedge in the back that will probably be removed. And then there's a new tree that we're planting in the back with respect to adding some landscaping at the rear of the property. Next slide, please. You'll see the front of the building there, and you'll see the elevations there. As you can see, the steps going up. You'll see the left side elevation. You can clearly see how it slopes towards the back on both sides of the building and at the rear. This is the reason why we're asking for that 17 inches in height. And that was my question to you. You're going to say to me, well, what about the height of the bedrooms? Well, with respect to the bedrooms are at 9 feet. And the reason why we have 9 feet, and we really can't take too much of that, is due to the fact that you have the spatial separations, the floor separations, ceiling floor separations, and there's no combustible material that can go through that, ducts and whatnot. So I need that 9 feet in order to create bulkheads and to allow a sufficient amount of room so we don't get caught with low ceilings with respect to the unit itself. So I get caught from a mechanical point of view and a technical point of view that I need that additional space for the height. When you're looking at the roof, we designed it in a way that we don't have a hip roof, a gable roof. We have a flat roof, and that flat roof is approximately 16, 18 inches in depth. That will be determined with the trusses once we get that all done. And then if you're looking at stormwater management, whatever, what we've done also there is we've created the flat roof, so the stormwater management will pond on the roof, and then it will provide the adequate drainage for this property. Next slide, please. That's just a topo showing the existing property as it sits today. When you're looking at the overall of this project, I feel that with respect to the 4 tests that are involved here, the variances, if they're minor, we believe that the variances are minor in this case here. The intent, the general intent of the person and the purpose of the official plan is maintained. We feel that the property is within the inner urban transit area under the neighborhood designation of Schedule A and Schedule 2B of the official plan. This is good development in this particular area. We're looking at intensifying the property with affordable rentable units in here. We did meet on Monday evening at 4 o'clock. We've met with the counselor, and I believe there was 4 or 5 neighbors that had showed up. The builder was there, staff from my office was there. I believe the meeting went fairly well. A lot of questions were asked. Basically, a lot of them were in relationship to the design of the building and, more importantly, with parking. They were all concerned about parking. But as I can tell you, that parking is not required on this particular property. And I believe that planning has looked at this. We've been going back and forth with planning. We had good dialogue with planning. I believe planning doesn't have any concerns on this project either. And as I said, we did meet with the neighbors. We did meet with counselors. We addressed most of the issues with everyone. And that's basically it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segreto. That was a very comprehensive presentation, and you answered one of my questions, which was great, which was that floor to ceiling height and why, whether or not there was any room for some change in that regard. But I think you've explained that one well. Going to open it up to, go ahead, member Lekeye, please.
For you, Madam Chair. Mr. Segreto, in your remarks, you mentioned that you'd be creating some affordable rental units.
Yes.
Are they like confirmed affordable through agreements with the city or the province or the federal government, or are they just, sometimes people throw the word affordable rental and
No.
There's a bit of a misunderstanding.
This particular developer building that we're dealing with, Goran, has done multiple units so far. We've been doing quite a bit with him over the last year or so, and he's going through CMHC on these things here. And as I said, there's 2 one-bedroom units there, and there are 2 two-bedroom units there. And in this particular neighborhood, my understanding is that they will be affordable. In addition to that, we are in permit. We're at the permit stage for another building just down the road right now at 79 Marquette, which is quite similar to what we're doing here today. It's just that it's a little bit bigger of a lot, and we don't have any variances on that as well. There's no variances on that one, I mean, but this one here we get caught because it's slightly not as deep lot as what we have on that other one. But they will be affordable units. That is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Member Keklikan, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Segreto, for the presentation. I believe it's page 4 of the proposal, where I noticed there's a quote here that I'm really this is a curiosity question more than anything. There's mention of the proposal incorporates setbacks which preserve and integrate existing natural features and are consistent with the cultural landscape of the neighborhood. I'm curious to know, where's that reference coming from in terms of cultural landscape?
I think it's just the wording that we used here in the office, but with respect to the side yard setbacks, this is to the side yard setbacks because we meet the front yard setback. With respect to the side yard setback, all that is really required is 1.2 meters, which is 4 feet. And what we're doing is we're actually reducing the building. It is at not 4 feet, but 5.5 feet. So we're providing an additional side yard setback of 1.5 feet on one side and 1.5 feet on the other side. That's what the intent of that phrase should be.
Okay, because I thought it was the broader picture, something to the effect of a streetscape character, but because a cultural landscape really is the broad picture of the neighborhood, and any human activity that has helped shape it and given its historic significance. And Vanier area, does have a heritage, I guess, element to it in terms of Francophone community and the developments of Ottawa. So I thought maybe you were making reference to that broad picture, which was, really be great. But anyway, okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, other questions from the committee on this? All right, okay, if that's the case, we can go to our public portion. I don't have anyone on my list to speak. Is there anyone in the audience or anyone online who would like to speak for or against 137 Marquette Avenue for minor variances? Okay, not seeing anybody. So in that case, Mr. Segreto, you've got 2 minutes to recap on this.
I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a new development here that's going to be beneficial for low rental income people in an area that is established with a lot of rental units in the area. So we're not out of the box on that. We're in the same sort of scenario with what we're doing. We think it's good intensification. It fits in well. The zoning allows for it. It's good development in the area. And we did a lot of work with planning on this one here. We did a lot of work with the counselor and the neighbors expressing their concerns, and we did talk with them, and we did our best. And I think we could move forward with this. It would be great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Segreto. I think we'll be reserving on this one if that's all right. So how about so as you know, you will get the decision in due course, 10 days. Can I just make one minor request, Mr. Segreto? In your report, and your report was very good. You provided some graphics that we needed, but there's no site plan in your report, and it would have made it easier to refer back to some of your comments if we had the actual site plan. At least in my version, I don't see, I've got your, your arguments and all your background, but I don't see a site plan in your report. Can I just ask that you include that in your reports in the future, if that would be all right?
I'm pretty sure it was included there. If you look at the PowerPoint, it would indicate on the site plan variance A and variance B. Maybe we can.
Well, so yes, we did get the site plan, but it's not actually in your your submission, your written context.
No problem. We can send that off to you.
Yeah, just all I'm suggesting is because in your comments, you're referring back to the functioning of the site and things like that. It just would be helpful to have the site plan as part of your package. Anyway, just a suggestion, Mr. Segreto. I'm not, I'm just saying that for me, maybe because I'm just old school, having it right there is just that much easier. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
And like I said, you'll get your decision. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Segreto.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, so that takes us to, hang on, I've got a list here of which, number 4. Let's go with 251 Columbus. I'm looking for Agent Mr. Hume. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the panel.
So Mr. Hume, we will be requesting a presentation from you.
Sure. This is a consent and minor variance application for 251 Columbus Street. It's proposing 2 8-unit low-rise apartment buildings comprising 2 one-bedroom units and 6 two-bedroom units. There are 3 minor variances. We're looking for change to the rear yard to 25% of lot depth, and that's to accommodate the sizes of the 2-bedroom units. When you start to get into the smaller lots, and these aren't small lots particularly because we meet all the minimum lot width and lot area, but slightly larger or slightly longer building depth allows for better unit sizes in the 2-bedroom unit area. And so as a result, we're looking for a little bit of lot depth, 1.5 meters, in fact, to do that. The second minor variances are to the parking provisions. On each of the lot, we're proposing a single space and a shared driveway, which requires a variance to 2 of the subsections in the R4 UC zone. And in fact, in all of the R4 the zones, you get these parking restrictions. And the reason for the space is as these units have been, or these buildings have been constructed. They're finding that loading and unloading spaces are a premium amenity that makes the building function better. You're loading, and predominantly because the front yards or the access from the buildings are at the front and at the back, these loading spaces become much more important to how the lot and the unit functions. And in keeping with the requirement, the intent of the R4 UC zones were to have density which would rely on active transportation and which would move the yardsticks forward. In putting a single loading space for each of them doesn't violate the intent of providing of promoting active transportation, because it's not providing in any way substantial parking for each of the units. But much more important is when you start to establish parking, what happens to the rear yard? Does the rear yard work? Which is a key consideration of the committee. So when we start to look at the rear yard, we took a bit of a different approach. All of the hard surface is not hard surface, actually, it's permeable. Therefore, in the context of the zoning bylaw, it meets the definition of soft landscaping. So we were able to meet the soft landscaping tests by changing the surfaces that we were using. In addition, we were able to provide the garbage and the cycling requirements in the rear yard and provide the required 25 square meters for tree planting that we would have in the back. So when you look at the totality, the impacts on the rear yard, they are actually quite minor. The rear yard still continues to function. It meets those important permeability for stormwater goals that the city has, and allows the other required functionality questions for garbage recycling and bicycles to be accommodated. We note the staff comment, which they reviewed the application, and we met the 4 tests and section 5124 of the Planning Act. With respect to the 4 tests, the variances we believe are minor in nature and will have no impact on the adjacent properties, and will not violate any of the official plan principles upon which the zoning is based with respect to active transportation and functionality of amenity spaces in the rear yard. So the requested variance allows for appropriate sensitive infill to be constructed, meeting the city's housing goals and contributing to an appropriate density that supports a 15-minute neighborhood. We believe that the intent and the purpose of the bylaw is maintained. The variances are not out of keeping with the broad neighborhood or planning objectives, and the general intent and purpose of the plan. The plan is maintained. And I want to note one last thing that wasn't on my slides. You received a comment from the community association with respect to front yard parking. Front yard parking is illegal. No one should be proposing front yard parking. And in respect to that, our site plan does show bollards in location to prevent front yard parking. So there's 4 of them on the site plan. So that's our submission, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hume, for that presentation. Are there questions from the panel? Yes, Member Lecuyer, please.
For you, Madam Chair, just a question. So you mentioned in your remarks about parking being a premium amenity. Those 2 proposed spots in the back, are they going to be temporary spaces for this unloading and
Yes.
unloading of groceries, as you mentioned in your application?
Right.
Or are these going to be
No.
reserved or sold to one of the occupants?
No, they're for loading and unloading spaces. When I mean they're an amenity that, they're a premium amenity in that a lot of these buildings don't have them. And as a result, the buildings don't function as well as they could from a loading and unloading perspective. And that's why you'll see, I believe, these developments coming forward that will have these spaces because they provide a better resident experience.
So as I guess a follow-up to that is functionality of the site. When I look at the picture, it looked like there was waste management right next to kind of where the parking spot was. And I'm not, like, I didn't go out with my understanding, but just generally looking at the picture, has there been any, again, I'm not an engineer or a parking engineer, so I don't know how this all works, but in terms of functionality of the site, is there any tests done to determine whether that this is
So
functional?
we believe,
I'm just going to ask the coordinator, can we zoom in on just the site plan there? Because I find that hard to read. So if we can just zoom in on it a little bit.
so we believe that the turning template can allow that parking space to come in, come around, and come out. So it comes, if you park, you come down the shared driveway, you come into the parking space, and you back, you come around, you back out, and then you would pull out into the shared driveway. So we believe that the spaces are functional and that a turning template would, although we don't show one here, a turning template would support that.
Okay, so that was going to be sort of my questions too, because I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at it, I found it a little difficult to follow. So this is where, the old days where we had the projector and you could actually get up and you could
Right
show
on
us.
it, yes.
It's a bit of a pain this way, but I'm not sold on that. Like, so you didn't submit any turning radiuses to be able to actually demonstrate that based on what, the transportation engineering uses as a
Right.
standard template for a vehicle, yada, yada. So I'm still, like, I'm seeing, I think it's bicycle parking that's on the side.
Yep.
So, and then you've got, as Member Lecuyer mentioned on the left, we see that there seems to be even some encroachment of some of those waste collection bins
Right.
into the parking space.
Oh, I don't think so, but,
Okay, so maybe-
but if you would like to condition us to provide a turning template, I mean, we can do that, because we believe that, and I don't have it here to show you, but I believe that it has been, that they've looked at it and that turning template does work. So.
Just so that I'm clear, so the intention is that cars would be backing into these spots. Therefore,
No,
if
you pull
okay.
in.
Yeah.
And you reverse out and then you pull out. So you pull in. So it's a shared driveway, right?
Yeah.
All the way to the end. You pull into your space, you back out, and then you come out frontwards. So it's like a hammerhead turn, right?
Okay.
In, back, and out.
And that won't hit the permeable landscape blocks that I'm just trying to read.
No, so the
Okay.
landscape blocks are in the front.
Okay.
And the entire surface is permeable landscape, right? So the blocks are at the bollards are at the front.
Okay. Member Keklikan, please.
Yeah, I think it would be very helpful to make this more reader friendly and more understandable
Yeah,
instead of trying to imagine how this would work.
Yeah, I didn't realize turning templates were going to be a big subject of the committee, but.
Well, it's not just the turning, it's how it functions. Is it
Right.
safe and it can work? So I think that's what we need to establish.
Right, and if you want to condition us to do that, we can do that in your approval because we believe it does work.
Okay. I mean, we understand that, but we believe you, but we just want to see the evidence. Thank you.
Yes, to Member Keklikan's point, it is the functionality for us, right, at the end of the day. Because if the parking spaces don't work, then they won't be used.
Right.
And so there wouldn't be any point in,
And having them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that's why we did find this site plan a little bit difficult to interpret. The dark colors with the dark dimensions kind of made it more difficult. Okay, can you tell me a little bit about your public consultation? Because you do have some, well, there were the concerns were from the Overbrook community.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit
No,
about your consultation?
we didn't do, other than the posting of the sign, we did not reach out to the Overbrook Community Association because in our opinion, it was a fairly benign, application. We quite frankly expected us to be on the fast track today. So we were quite surprised to be here because it's a very, in our opinion, minor, it was very minor. So, and the Overbrook, and we read the Overbrook comments. They don't relate to our proposal. They relate to an application or a development that occurred in their neighborhood. And they're saying to you, don't let front yard parking happen here. And our site plan shows bollards that prevent exactly what the Overbrook Community Association is concerned about.
Okay, thank you for that. I just, sorry, yes, Member Blather, go ahead, please.
Can we pull that site plan back up again, please? Okay, and we'll look at the back to begin with. Mr. Hume, I know that it's a preference of the planning department and the transportation planners that you enter and leave your parking space in a forward direction, which is the reason why many of these projects are developed with hammerhead turn parking spaces in the rear. However, would, in your opinion, these parking spaces work if it was a drive-in back out?
Absolutely. If you can navigate that, it's wide enough to drive in, it's wide enough to back out.
Yeah. Okay, and if we could move to the front of the street frontage of this site plan, please. Okay. Where are the bollards preventing front yard parking? I don't see anything on this site.
You can see right at the front, new bollards, there's 4 of them. Right below or right sort of below the, I want to say purple lines at the front. You see the 2 parallel purple lines coming across. And if you look right below, there you go. Right below there, it says new bollards.
Okay. And those are on city property, correct?
Sorry?
Those are on city property?
They are.
All right.
We can easily move them onto our property.
And exactly, what exactly is the design of that bollards? Are they just posts?
Well, bollards are traditionally posts in the ground, either made of some immovable material. They could be a wood 4x4 or a concrete pillar.
Okay, and how far apart are those bollards in the front yard that you have on your site plan? How far apart are they?
I'm sorry, they're not dimensioned, so I don't.
Well, if we look at the width of the driveway, they're wider than a vehicle.
Right.
So you can drive.
We're happy to add an additional one. The point, front yard parking is illegal, and we're not promoting, and nor would we establish front yard parking because it's a zoning bylaw infraction. And I will tell you, if you establish front yard parking, you won't get your right-of-way deposit back. So each of these buildings will have to provide right-of-way deposits, and it's not unsubstantial sums. Like it's almost $6,000, and you won't get that money back, and you will get a zoning infraction. So
All right.
What,
So
you
you're,
know,
so you're putting these, they're putting these bollards in, Mr. Hume. So why are you asking for variances B, E to prevent no solid permanent features?
because you can't, because the bollards would prevent it across all of the frontage. And so what we're asking for a variance to allow the shared driveway, right? So the sections, the subsection says propose solid fixtures to prevent front yard parking, but to allow parking in the rear yard, whereas solid permanent fixtures are required sufficient to prevent parking across the entire frontage.
No. Frankly, Mr. Hume, I see no reason why you've applied for variance B or E if you're going to prevent vehicle parking in the front yard.
Right.
That should not be a problem.
Right.
And quite frankly, your bollards on city property, not on your property, so you're going to have to get approval from the city to put those there.
So we went, our fear is always that we don't apply for a minor variance and we get to building code services and they kick us back, right? And so, and we've had experience where we've been to the committee with a series of variances and we've gone to permit and we've actually had to come back to, and that was actually this year on Prince of Wales Drive. So we're very cautious about what being, not having to come back.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hume. I have, I guess, a follow-on question to, is it Ms. Horn, I believe, on this? So this provision, the variance B that's being sought, the one that's generating a lot of discussion here today, is not one we've ever, I don't think I've ever seen this one before, I'll be honest with you. So it's a new one on me. And you know, I'm a bit surprised that the requirement doesn't have to necessarily be contained on the subject property. And so in my second question, I guess on that is, are there any best practice? So when somebody wants to meet the spirit of the bylaw, how do they, you know, to member Blatherwick's point about the distancing of the bollards or the number of bollards that have to be there? How does, like, is there anything, any guide to developers or proponents in that regard? Just trying to get a better sense of what's expected.
Thank you, Madam Tremblay. Essentially, I think what we would be looking for in the review is that the bollards are narrow enough or spaced such that a legal parking space, the width of a legal parking space couldn't be accommodated, if that makes sense. So it's generally 2.6 meters wide. So we would be looking for something that's less than that in terms of how far apart the bollards would be.
And did you review that as part of the site plan? Because I agree, it looks like it's in fact over 3 meters.
Thank you, Madam Tremblay. As essentially, in this case, they are looking to vary that provision.
So even though they're putting them in, they don't actually, so because they're putting the bollards in, but they don't meet, and I don't see the spacing requirement as part of the zoning bylaw provision, but that's triggering the need for a minor variance. Is that what I'm understanding?
Sorry, Madam Tremblay, could you please repeat that again?
I know it's confusing. I'm confused too. That's why. So we're trying to understand. So the variance being requested is to not have to provide the solid permanent fixtures sufficient to prevent motor vehicle parking. But what we found through our discussion is that in fact they are providing them. They're not providing them on the subject property. They're providing them on city property. And I think we're also determined that they're wider than what we would expect to prevent motor vehicle parking. So all I can really conclude from that is that the purpose of the variance is to say, even though they've shown it off-site, they don't, if we approve the proposal, including this variance B, they wouldn't have to put it in at all. So it doesn't matter that they're not, you know, less than 2.6 meters wide, like apart. Let me just finish up with Ms. Horn, if I could, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Hume.
So we do receive comments from right-of-way staff, and it wasn't flagged as being an issue. They will likely need an encroachment permit, I believe, in order to install the bollards.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Ms. O'Connell because let me just finish the staff. I'll come back to you. All right, thanks. Ms. O'Connell, go ahead, please.
I think these bollards on the city property, I think this is new information to city staff. I certainly didn't notice them on the site plan myself, and I don't know if our right-of-way staff picked up that there was bollards proposed on city property. So I would suggest, I'm doubtful that they would be permitted, to be honest, on city property themselves. And so I would suggest if the variance is to consider no solid surface in the front yard, then that be considered on its own without consideration of these bollards. And procedurally, if it's up to the committee's discretion, but I would suggest we get a revised site plan submitted to the committee without bollards shown on city property within the right of way.
So the question then becomes, Ms. O'Connell, would staff still be supporting that variance, knowing what you know now? Hate to put you on the spot. I don't need to do that, but we really do need some clarity on it.
I think what's shown on the site plan right now is landscaping, and that's likely, from my on the spot position right now, sufficient enough from staff's perspective to prevent front yard parking. I'm also conscious of the fact that it is a bylaw variation to have the front yard parking in itself. And this is a provision we need to educate ourselves a little bit more on what the intention was in the first place. But I'm comfortable with this application moving ahead essentially in its current form without those bollards shown on city property.
So Ms. O'Connell, then staff, I guess, if I'm getting what you're saying is that you thought the bollards were on the property, and because you thought that they were on the property, that in fact they met your requirements from a, like I'm still trying, if they met the requirement of the zoning bylaw, then there's no need for a minor variance. But here's what I'm going to propose. How about then we, if we go ahead with an approval, that it would be to revise the site plan in consultation with your department and to, in your approval in a spirit that would meet, it would either meet the zoning bylaw requirement and then not necessitate the need for variance B, or, yeah, that's sort of where I am. So the other option is we stick with B and we revise the site plan simply to remove the bollards. It's kind of our options here.
I'd leave that to the committee to their discretion, what they prefer to move forward. I think staff are comfortable in either provision.
All right, thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Hume, over to you.
If I can help you, Madam Chair, we're not asking for you to eliminate the bollards, right? So, and I think, and it was our mistake, we should have put them on the property line. Fair enough. What the bylaw provision says is that you need to install permanent solid fixtures to prevent motor vehicle parking, period. So what we're asking you to vary that provision and say that the proposed solid fixtures will prevent, we are required to install permanent solid fixtures to prevent front yard parking, but to allow parking in the rear yard. That gets you. So now you need to provide in the front yard, you need to provide those bollards, which we're prepared to do. But it allows no bollards to be established in the shared driveway leading to the rear parking space. That was the intent of the variance.
I see. So your worry was that the bollards would have to be completely across the frontage at spaces less than 2.6. And because of that, that's what we need here.
Yes. So we're just saying you're creating that little 3 meter, I think it's 3 meter width with no bollards, but bollards everywhere else to prevent that front yard parking, which was the intent when we applied.
All right, so what we would have to do though is get a revised site plan from
Yep,
you to do
absolutely.
a couple of things.
Okay.
So to bring the bollards back onto
Yep.
the subject property and to include a sufficient number so that, and you know, I'm not going to do the math on the fly
You don't need to
here.
do the math. You just need to give me the direction. I get
Okay,
what you're
good,
meaning.
good. But the bollards cannot be, and we heard this from staff, that's what they're looking for, less than 2.6 meters
Yep.
apart.
Yep,
Okay, I think we have a plan.
there you go.
Mr. Hugh.
Madam
Go
Chair-
ahead, Mr. Member.
Madam Chair.
McKicken.
If I could just clarify, we will need that site plan by the end of the day tomorrow.
Yep. That's fine.
All right, so, okay, Member
And-
Keklikan,
and
go ahead,
just to
please.
Follow up, Madam Chair, we talked earlier about the turning radii for parking. Would that be part of the new site plan?
Why not? If you've already done the work, then it's just an overlay
Yeah,
of that on top of the site plan. That would be great. So,
As one package, yeah.
okay.
yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for raising that, Member Keklikan. I'd forgotten about it. Okay. So, did we do the public portion of this yet? I don't think we did. I'm kind of like, okay, where are we now? Good discussion, though. I learned something today. This is good. Okay, so where are we? On number 4, I have nobody who's registered to speak. So is there anyone in the audience here or online who would like to speak to the application at 251 Columbus Avenue? All right, I'm not seeing anybody, so 2 minutes to recap, Mr. Hume.
Madam Chair, I've taken up enough time at the committee. So
All right.
I understand your direction and it will be provided by end of day tomorrow.
All right, so members of the panel, are we ready to vote or are we reserving on this? Okay, let's reserve then on this. So thank you very much, Mr. Hume. Perfect. Okay. I believe the next one is number 6, which is 346 Roosevelt. And I think we're looking for Agent Edwards. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chairperson. It's Dexter Edwards, acting as agent with the owners of the property at 346 Roosevelt.
So can you please provide their names for the record?
Sean Westwell.
Kurt Westwell.
Okay, perfect. We're going to be requiring a presentation from you today, Mr. Edwards. So floor is yours. Go ahead.
So this is an application that was adjourned previously, as we discussed, to have some additional discussions with staff. The project
Just a moment. Is there PowerPoint presentation? I believe you submitted one yesterday, did you not?
there wasn't one submitted for presentation, no.
No, you had no presentation, no PowerPoint submitted for this? Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought there was. My apologies. Go ahead.
So I have 5 minutes. Okay. In either case, it's an adjournment, as you know. So for the property at 346 Roosevelt, we are simply looking to look at the existing construction that's been approved for a triplex on that property and look to increase the unit count from 3 units to 6 units. The existing building, as proposed in the original, is a 4-story building with parking at the first level and 3 levels above for units. We then looked at the application with regards to the variances that would be needed to shift it to a different category under the low-rise apartment as opposed to a triplex. And this is where our variances are sought. So starting with the lot frontage, we had a requirement to have underneath a low-rise apartment, 18 meters is the lot frontage. We currently have 15.28 meters, which meets the zoning requirement under a 3-unit building So we're looking for a variance on that difference. The lot area is required to be 540 meters squared underneath the low-rise apartment under the R5B. And we are looking to get a variance to allow for 454 meters squared. There are two other variances sought on the side yards. One interior side yard to the north side of the property is required to be 2.5 meters within 21 meters of the front property line underneath the low-rise apartment building. And we currently have under the triplex as the same zoning at 1.21 meters, which meets that requirement, but not the low-rise apartment building. The south side of the property on the interior side yard is a requirement for 3 meters to be met with regards to the low-rise apartment. We currently have 1.21 meters. So there's also a variance sought there to reduce that. So the objective that we were looking for was to maintain the existing building's size, volume, and its existing approval underneath the triplex, and just increase internally the amount of units that would be allowed from 3 under the triplex to a 6, which changes the category. So in the application submission, I had identified the different descriptions underneath the 4 points for variance, and we felt that they were met. And the existing street has, it's a cul-de-sac. So at the very end of the street, which is adjacent to the proposed or the existing transitway, those properties have been zoned at an R5B, and everything in the street to the south has been zoned as an R3S. So that's why we have the adjacencies that are a little bit different. There's been a number of exchanges with different neighbors since the last discussion that we had, and we had responses provided to everyone that we were given. The feedback has been mostly focused on the, I guess, appropriateness of the building as opposed to the actual variance requirement specifically. Some comments with regards to the subjective nature of the fact that it's a 4-story building with multiple units in an area that's predominantly semi-detached with 2-story buildings predominantly. But we're looking to have some thoughts with regards to the fact that we're meeting the R5 provision in terms of its ultimate objective, which is to actually vary the types of residences and dwelling units with the intent for an intensified application. So we feel that we meet that. And that's it.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Edwards. You are aware that there's a number of submissions that have been made, though, from the public that are in opposition of the proposal. But I just want to make one thing, I just want to be absolutely clear on one point. So you're not proposing any new development. You are simply renovating the interior in order to create additional units. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the members of the panel? Yes, Member Lurkey, you go ahead.
You, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just, there's no page numbers on your submission, but in your cover letter, just because I'm not an urban planner or an architect, you show your table here, which I thought actually was rather helpful, of the reason why you're before us, the middle column, that's what you're proposing.
That's correct.
And then to the left is what a low-rise apartment would be, which is the standard against which you are being held.
Correct.
But if this was considered a 3-unit building,
yes,
you would be held to the other standard on the other side, which you wouldn't require variance for. And so you're kind of in this tricky middle, and that's what you're trying to display here. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions from the panel on this? I think, yeah, go ahead, Member Lurkey.
There. In the second page of your application, you talk about that you are doing your part to increase affordable rental stock. Is this affordable? Are these affordable units under any kind of agreement long-term agreement with some kind of either government or nonprofit entity? Or are these, sometimes people will throw around the word they're creating affordable housing, but there's not actual agreement to that. So I just would like clarification on that, please.
Well, the clarification in the intent, as I had written it, was not that there was some affordable arrangement with regards to a government or subsidy. I assume that there could be discussions made with the owner moving forward, but the intent was to say that the cost of the units would be in the range of what would be affordable for the use of the word affordable in that area. So we're going from large units per floor, which would have been the equivalent of a condo unit, if you will, to two separate units, one 2-bedroom and a bachelor unit on the same floor.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so I do for Ms. Horn. Okay, where was I? So we've talked a lot about site functionality, and here we have a situation where we're increasing the density on a lot of record that currently under a triplex actually meets all of the zoning provisions. When you intensify on the same lot and you're looking for relief, then the first thing from at least my perspective is how well does the site respond to the functions required? So in this case, can you confirm, I think I know the answers to these, just for the record, parking requirements, I don't believe there's any loading requirements, landscape requirements. We saw a variance that was new to us on the whole bollard discussion. So, is that not something we would be looking at here? So I'm just looking for a little bit more on the functionality from your end, Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Tremblay. So in this scenario, it's zoned R5, and so the bollards or preventing front yard parking don't actually apply. In terms of functionality, things like waste storage and bike storage, the applicant has indicated that it would be stored internal to the building, which in our opinion also sort of reduces the impact on abutting properties. And there's adequate soft landscaping as well.
All right, thank you, Ms. Horn. I was wondering if we could just bring the site plan up again just for a moment, because it wasn't as part of, so Mr. Edwards, you heard my comments to Mr. Segreto about adding maybe the site plan in your report. I would just ask the same thing of you going forward, if that's okay. Your site plan looks great, by the way, but can we just zone in on it just a little bit so I can get a better feel of, so it's, oh, there we go, thank you. So there's no impact, obviously, on the trees. There's no impact on any of the existing site elements outside of the building, just to confirm?
Well, there's a slight impact to the tree, which is on the south at the front corner of the building. That would be the right side, that large CRZ zone that's shown. Based on the TIR, which is the information report from the arborist, there is an impact to reduce the zone of what's covered because of the walkway. But in discussions with planning, we've identified how we would actually construct that walkway. And we're not impeding on the root zone very much below, but we are saying we're going across it to have a walkway. Anything else that's being supported by a foundation or dug in is nowhere near the zone. So that would be the one. The other impact on that tree is that it's a Manitoba maple that has multiple stems. There's about 5 stems on them. We have, in the current scenario, there's 1 stem that's already been cut and the tree is still performing. We are proposing that we cut an additional stem, which is actually running horizontal across into the area where we would be building. So what we've discussed with the arborist was cutting that 1 stem out of the remaining 5 to see if they felt that that would be a problem. Based on the report and his identification, it's a hardy type of a tree. It could withstand that single cut, and it's not something where it wouldn't be something to pay attention to, but it's not going to, in his opinion, kill the tree, and the tree will be able to survive that one cut. The cut that we're proposing is actually one of a branch that is not the main branch of the tree as it's structured. There's some images or pictures of that. And so we propose that we would do that. By cutting back that canopy slightly, we've sort of nicked the zone of a small percentage. We've also, in discussion with city staff, proposed the planting of a new tree over on the other side, which is to the north, where you see that small walkway. That small tree there is also to make sure that our front yard parking provisions are not going to have anything more than what's allowed, which is access to the 2 parking on the driveway. And that walkway that is adjacent to that small tree leads us to the garbage and the recycling storage that's within the building. So that's a point of entry. So apart from that, every other tree that's around, there's already provisions in place with infrastructure and drainage that's going to make sure that those trees are unaffected moving forwards. There's no effect from the actual construction of the building. The perimeter of the building itself is set back to the right requirements, both on the sides as well as the rear yard.
Okay, so no changes to this building structure itself, but some changes to the site in terms of the amenity space and features.
Right.
Okay, I just wasn't clear. And the parking spaces here, just so that I make sure that I've got the understanding, is where exactly then?
They're internal to the building as well.
They're internal.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So there's no parking provision required, but we're providing 2 anyways internally. And the driveway that you see is the required width allowed, and it feeds those 2 entries to the building.
All right, perfect. Okay. That's my questions. Anyone else from the panel, further questions on this? Nope, not seeing, I can't see member Blatherwick though. Okay. All right. That being the case, then we can go to the public portion on this application. Let's see. What have I got? Yes, I do have somebody on the on my list. Mr. Proudfoot, do we have him here or online? Mr. Proudfoot. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, that's not Mr. Proudfoot. All right, so do we have Mr. Proudfoot anywhere? No, okay. Okay, so Mr. Cheeseman. Yes, I think you were an addition this morning to our speakers list. So go ahead, you've got 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is the first time I've participated in this process, and I've actually found it quite enlightening. Before I give my remarks, I just wanted to clarify an element of the presentation from the proponent. I believe it was said that this was a renovation to an existing building. That's not the case. The lot in question is currently vacant. So just wanted to clarify that right out of the gate.
Well, if I may, the statement wasn't that it was a renovation. The statement is that there's a building permit that's in place to build a triplex as approved. And we are looking to increase the unit count from 3 to 6. So there's no building on the site, but there's one that's approved, and we've delayed construction to be able to get some feedback on this to know what our options are.
Okay, perfect. It would be great to know anything about that, because as a resident who lives directly across the street, we had no awareness of that prior to this committee of adjustment process. I'd also love to receive a copy of the application that was referenced in the presentation, the one that the other panel member was asking about in terms of affordable housing. We have not seen that. So I'm a resident, as I mentioned, of Roosevelt Avenue. I live directly across the street at 346. I think it's fairly clear my family and I oppose this application. We're not opposed to densification. And in our view, it's a necessary condition for a thriving, vibrant urban community. We live in an infill, semi-detached 2-story home. We'd love to ditch the car and live in an inclusive, sustainable, and safe community with easy access to employment and amenities. Key to this type of neighborhood is thoughtful and intentional planning and development. Sadly, this application has neither. This application does not meet the tests to be granted minor variances. The proposal, more than doubling the height of the rest of the detached and semi-detached houses that make up the stretch of Roosevelt, north of Richmond, and overfilling the lot, is completely out of character. The relief sought from the setbacks, frontage, and lot area for the scale of the proposed development are also significant. Asking to reduce the required setbacks from 3 meters and 2.5 meters to only 1.2 meters is significant. The requested relief on lot frontage in excess of 20%, a reduction of almost 3 meters, is significant. The relief sought on a lot area of 540 to 500 to 454 is also significant. We believe the proponent misinterpreted the minimum setbacks, frontage, and lot area required for a building of this height, and yet did not make any adjustments to the proposal when that error came to light, hence the adjournment. They simply increased the ask for relief. I'm also disappointed by the city planning department that they're in support of this application, justified only by the line that I received via email that I quote, "We must examine the future context as outlined in the provincial policy and our official plan in addition to the current context." This rationale ignores the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the proposal drastically reduces the minimum lot width and lot area of the property and does not maintain sufficient building setbacks and soft landscaping area. If we quote unquote examine the future context, it also ignores one of the principles of the current draft of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, which calls for expanding the requirements for soft landscaping to help establish the preconditions for more trees, ensuring room is preserved in front and rear yards as properties are being redeveloped. Based on my understanding of the new draft bylaw, while looking to increase density, it is also looking to increase yard setbacks, something this proposal does not do. This proposal is not looking to the current nor the future. The existing bylaw is also very clear in its intent that taller buildings require greater setbacks to provide separation between buildings of differing heights. The transition between differing zoning types should be taken seriously. In this case, the zoning changes from R3 to R5. Having these two buildings within less than 1.5 meters is simply not tenable. I'm not a planner, and I understand that buildings with dramatically different heights need to have dramatically greater separation. Other nearby development proposals are complying with the existing setback requirements. This proposal should as well. I also want to underscore that the consultation of residents in this process has been almost non-existent. When residents expressed concerns in the Committee of Adjustment process offering to meet with a proponent, we were met with silence. Only on Friday of last week, I received a rebuttal from the agent outlining their position in this case, but not taking into account the concerns the community and the residents had presented. I replied outlining our concerns in more detail and offering to meet and discuss them more fully. I did not receive a reply, and there was no public meeting. I know that we cannot litigate the official plan in the context of this hearing. Even so, I must highlight that the current zoning is completely incongruent with the existing street. I've been struck by the other presentations today that provided illustrations of how their proposals were congruent with the rest of the neighborhood, something that's completely lacking in this application. Overfilling a lot on the terminus of a dead-end street, regardless of the proximity to a future LRT station, is not thoughtful or consistent with the character and use of the street. Given the sensitive location of the proposal, it should make every effort to conform to the existing limits clearly articulated in bylaw, limits which are likely to be expanded when the new zoning bylaw is adopted. Instead, significant relief is being sought on several fronts. I know I'm out of time, so I just want to wrap up quickly. As a community, our dream would be for this lot to be converted into part of a larger park, connecting Westboro to the LRT and linking the Kitchissippi Trails, the Ottawa River, and Westboro Beach. When LRT construction is completed, the pedestrian bridge over the trench will be reinstalled, making this area an ideal connection point for the community. If we connected it with 342 and the city-owned lot on 341 Berkeley, we could elegantly weave this connection together, leveraging the pair of ancient and enormous trees on these properties. I believe this is an opportunity to create something that resonates with the community, stays in character with the existing streetscape, and benefits the current owners of the lot financially. We simply need to come together and work creatively on a beneficial solution for all. Unfortunately, this proposal is not it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeseman, for that well-prepared presentation to the committee. It's always appreciated, so thanks for taking the time to do that. All right, so there's two issues here, Mr. Edwards, that we need to address. So you did touch on it on your presentation, but please tell me a little bit more about the consultation you undertook with the neighborhood.
Yes, so ever since we had the discussion on the last fact that we adjourned back in December, there was correspondence that was provided a couple of days before as I received it from city staff. We were not aware prior to that there was any opposition, so we took the chance to look at it and responded. So at the beginning of December, it was written responses to all of the ones that we had received. We sent those out. There was also an additional letter that was drafted from the property owners to the neighbors and their contact information that we had. We didn't have any other list. At the time, there was a discussion that was provided back to Mr. Gray, who was the association rep, and there was no response on that correspondence that we sent. Subsequent to that, we saw no other feedback except for this past week, a week ago, where we started to see a number of other residents sending in information individually. We responded to all of those individually. And we also provided back as much as possible clarifications or feedback based on the questions. So there was response back to the community association rep who was in receipt first week of December. That's a month ago. If there was no activity up until a week ago, we did not. No, we did not have a public arrangement. What I did send out in the responses was an opportunity to talk about it if there was a need with providing contact information. But there was no planned public presentation to the committee because there was no need or response from them requiring us to do so. So in this context, if we needed to have had a public consultation, that was not known to us. And as I mentioned before, we're in a situation where the development of the site is already in a approval status. The question is really adjustments to that development, what we can and cannot do in adding to it. So those are the only responses I can give because that's the only information that I've been provided.
All right, so there is, I think from neighbors seeing a difference between 3, which is in keeping with the zoning bylaw, to 6 is for them, you know, that's not a minor increase in most residents' perception. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, and it's about compatibility. So when the committee considers whether something is minor, compatibility is an important piece. I will agree with some of the comments I've read, Mr. Edwards, the submission is a little light. And so unless I missed it, is there a land use graphic that analyzed the surrounding context for us to consider?
No, we did not provide a land use graphic for the surrounding community to look at. We only looked at the immediate area with regards to the adjacencies on the zoning and identified what we had in our proposal relative to what was existing on the street.
Okay, because having some of that is helpful in, because we've got a lot of opposition, right? So there's a lot of folks that are saying this isn't necessarily a great fit. So that kind of evidence to be able to provide the applicant's side would have been helpful to us in this case, but I'm going to leave that there for a minute. Member Dehuye, go ahead, please. Oh, sorry, Member Blatherwick, you had your hand up earlier? Sorry, Member Blatherwick, we can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have a question for Ms. Horn. And as the age I'm at, my memory fails occasionally. So Ms. Horn, this property was subject to variances in the past for a triplex?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Blatherwick. In terms of past applications, I don't believe there was a minor variance for the triplex that the applicant has obtained a building permit for.
Okay, so this was it was an application for a triplex and it's received building permit approval.
Yes, that's correct.
And when was that application filed and approved?
If it's okay with you, Mr. Blatherwick, I'd like to direct that to the applicant.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, so the approval for the triplex was received in December or in November, approximately a month and a half ago. So at that point, we looked at the options that we had, but the application was filed in 2023, and the discussions that were ongoing for that period of time had to do with our dealing with the infrastructure. The issues that came up had to do with the fact that we needed to provide sprinklering as well as looking at the water pressure and a number of other things that we need to provide them with the hydrology on so that they could review. So the application went through all the steps within building services, except the last step was with regards to the infrastructure. And then that approval was provided to us. So we got that approval sometime in November. The property owners paid for that permit and received it. And I had been discussing with them their options in terms of increasing the unit size as a part of the intensification in the parallel process, and identified that this needed to happen very quickly within the short term because of the time frame of the application and the fact that the building code is changing and the number of changes would be effective by March 31st of this year. So everything's happening in an intense manner within a 3-month window, but the application approval was received back in November.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Just as a comment, you apply for a triplex, the neighbors figure your applicants are going to build a triplex, and suddenly you turn around and decide to put 6 units in there without even talking to them. This does not play well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, over to Member Lecuyer, please.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, I'm just trying to clarify, you mentioned the new building code, and now I'm remembering your application and why we were adjourning. So to clarify, the reason for the increase, if you would have kept it as is, as a triplex, you wouldn't have needed any minor variances.
No, that's correct.
Okay. And so the reason why you're here today is that you wanted to increase the unit count, and that's why it triggered all of these things.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to add as well, that the discussion regarding the application in the process of doing the triplex, there was no public consultation that was required. Correct. And it was a process that was standard. So at any point, if it's identified that we needed to look through that a different way, which would be similar to any kind of a site plan control submission, then we would have done that. But that's not what the process was.
And so just to clarify, the rationale from going from 3 to 6 in such a short period of time was obviously financing of housing has changed in recent years, the use of the building code. Just curious of the rationale of and again, you're trying to move very quickly, so.
Well, the rationale from the property owner's point of view is that the demographic for the type of unit that was originally designed is quite large, and it's a smaller demographic now. In terms of cost and affordability, if I can use that term, for people that are looking for 2 bedrooms or bachelors was much higher. So it's a larger demographic that they'd be able to have and making available for rental.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Because I'm going to go on with the book, because we got on to discussions on a number of things, which is helpful to clarify. But I'm going to make another cut. So we heard from Mr. Cheeseman. Is there anyone else in the audience? Come on down, Mr. Gray. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, just to clarify a couple of things right out of the gate. I've got the letter that was written to the 4 people that sent comments in the last time. Right in the letter, it says, when I started this project 15 years ago. Okay, this this isn't a recent thing. This has been going on for many, many years. And in this blurb here, this little history, it talks about how they were going to build the building for their 3 sons and so on and so forth. That's great. And at the time, I'm sure it was all compliant, but that's not the case now. Nothing near that. So I really have a hard time with this proposal because it doesn't even come close to passing the 4 tests. A reduction of a side yard from 3 meters to 1.2, it's massive. And I know we're not supposed to get into, adding and subtracting and percentages and all this other stuff. But at some point, you know, you have to think about that. But beyond that, it's the intent. Why does that bylaw exist? And the intent is crystal clear. When you have a zoning that doesn't allow for a low rise or whatever, and the abutting zoning is, they're asking to build a low rise, you have to have the greater separation in the building. It's just common sense. And that's for a number of reasons: fire safety, and the, you know, air movement. And I did that little sketch where I showed how the building encroaches into the 45-degree separation thing, which is not something that's really legitimate here. But I see that every single time on these larger buildings. That's something they have to show, that, you know, it's a limiting what the encroachment is on the sunlight of the abutting property. And this is it's just it's outrageous. I'm sorry. There's no other way to put it. When you're asking for such a reduction in the side yard, and that's what it is. If these guys want to build their 3-unit building, go for it, because they apparently have approval. I don't know. And to one of the panel members' point is that there's a need for larger units in Westboro. Everything is now being focused on these, 1, 2, and tons of bachelor. Well, I want to see family units in Westboro, and they could easily provide it, and we'd support them on that. But, the zoning is so clear on this one. It just is, and right in there in the end note, it specifically talks about any building over 11 meters. And these guys want 14 meters. It is written so specifically for this this application. The other thing is, you see some of these other agents, and they come with examples. I would like to see one example in Westboro where there's an R5 abutting an R3 that doesn't have a separation of 3 meters. It's a legitimate question, and the emphasis is on them to prove their case, and they are not even close on this one. I'm sorry, I'm upset.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray, on that. I would have to agree, Mr. Edwards, that more planning evidence would have been helpful for the committee with regards to compatibility, with regards to exactly the kind of thing that Mr. Gray was just pointing to, examples where there are reductions, where it's, already, seen in the neighborhood and functions. I think that's the other thing too. So in any event, okay. I think I'm not sure that there was something we needed to explore further on the basis of Mr. Gray's comments. So
Well, if I could respond to one item.
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Mr. Gray's comments. Mr. Gray's comment says that he does not see a situation where you have an R5 next to an R3 that would require the fact that it's not a building that's above 11 meters. As a matter of fact, you have the situation right here. The zoning for that R5 next to this R3 allows for 15 meters. It's there. So in terms of the height restriction, when you have an R5 that allows for 15 meters adjacent to an R3 that has 11 meters, that distance has already been set at 1.2 meters. So meeting that is that the building is set at the height that's required. Once we're looking at the change in terms of the units from 3 to 6, one of the things that I discussed with the client was we cannot raise the height of this building. Whatever we do, we have to make sure that we can accommodate it within the existing volume and existing height. So we're not going above 15 meters. They can attest to that. And the whole discussion regarding the fact that we're adjacent or the height was already calculated. That's why it was set up in the zoning to say, if you're an R5 and you're adjacent to an R3, you cannot exceed 15 meters. And the way that they've done that is to create 2 categories. The lower category is to make it a triplex maximum. To go to an increase to a low rise is not something that they would have automatically. You would need to now look at relief and go through the process of looking at it. So it's not a direct, deliberate intent to do anything other than what was already approved. And the intent is to maintain that height because we are aware of the fact that you've set 15 meters relative to 1.2 meters to make sure that there's some light and the transition of light through from the adjacent property. So I think that that's an error, and I just want to clarify that. I understand that there would need to be additional discussions on a number of other points. However, the correspondences has not been where we've set up a public forum to have that discussion. In any other case, we have been responding. Thanks, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Could I
Edwards.
just say something?
You've got like 30 seconds.
I'm just going to
Mr. Gray.
point out that in my submission, I put in the end note of from the zoning that specifically talks about any building over 11 meters, the setback has to be greater. That's the thing. The exception on the lot, the urban exception, is to 18 meters. If he wants to bring a proposal, to the community to build an 18-meter building, that's well within his right. And as a matter of fact, next door tonight, I am hearing from the builder of the very property next door who want to build a 20-meter building, okay, that has the exact same zoning. So we're not in a position where we're trying to, say that you shouldn't develop this lot, but it has to be within some, zoning parameters and the intent of the zoning. That's all we're asking for.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray. Member Durkee, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to hear from the city planning department, just in light of Mr. Gray's comments. So when I look at the zoning relief being sought, we're looking at reduced lot frontage, interior yard setback, and reduce a lot area. Nothing on height is being sought as relief. But I just want to confirm that the city doesn't have any concerns about this application, that it does, in your opinion, meet the 4 tests. Could you just confirm that, please?
Yes, that is correct. But in addition, in terms of the discussion around the side yard setbacks, one of the intents behind the larger requirements for a low-rise apartment is for access to the functional requirements such as the bike parking and garbage storage, just to make sure that there's enough room for people to take their bikes in and out of the rear yard. In this scenario, those functions are internal to the building, and so it's not really necessary, or it's not as necessary, that extra space for access. That's just one of the intents of that provision as well.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that is very helpful, Ms. Horn. So just so I'm clear going in, because we're going to reserve on this gentleman, I can almost guarantee that's where we're going. So for the if it were the 3 units, if they continued with what they have a building permit with for now, what would the side yard requirements be for that?
Sorry, 1 second, Madam Chair. I'm just going to check my notes.
Take your time.
Yeah, I guess if we could confirm that what the applicant has in their cover letter of that column, if the city concurs, that is the three-unit building and what's listed there. If they could confirm that that is indeed correct, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder that it was there. Helpful.
Thank you. I would like to confirm that that table is correct. Sorry, it is at 1.2 meters. I just want to.
All right, so it's 1.2, not 1.21, right? I just want to be clear. It's not quite that. Okay, and the lot area is 450. So all of the rest of the provisions that are listed under R5B zoning for approved three-unit building are correct, except for they've added the one, which you don't need. It's 1.2. Anything else? Like, so if we're looking at front yard setback, what's the actual front? What does the bylaw require for the front yard setback?
I believe it's at 6 meters for the front. Oh, sorry, 1 second. It's 6 meters, yes.
So 6 meters for the front yard setback, not 7.16, right? So 6 meters. Rear yard setback is what? I'm just trying to get a sense of was originally applied for, what's being asked today, and the variances between, no, bad word, the differences between what the provisions are
Yep.
under the zoning bylaw for what you have
Yes.
obtained a building permit for. And
just on the right side of the table, the word approved at the top is what's been approved. The actual zoning, if it's going back to the actual zoning bylaw, she's correct, it's 6 meters. And the number that you'll see for the rear yard is also going to be well within that 7.43. So what
I'm
listed,
expecting it's 6 meters rear as well, but we're going to let Ms. Horn come back on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the minimum rear yard setback would be 25% of the lot depth, which must comprise at least 25% of the area of the lot. However, it need not exceed 7.5 meters.
So is it, let's see, we don't have a rear yard setback. We just have a reduced frontage. Okay. So presumably it meets it then under the bylaw. I don't know if it's 7.43 or not. And just the building height maximum is 14 meters. Is that correct?
It's 19 meters.
It's 19 meters so this would be for the 3 units.
Oh, sorry. No, so it has a height exception on it, on the zone.
Okay, and what is the maximum height for a 3 unit, based on what they have approval for?
So it's, it would be 19 meters.
So as of right, they could build a 3-unit building and they could do it to 19 meters. Is that correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
correct. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll let my my colleague, Ms. O'Connell, step in on that one.
Yep, there's an H on the zoning that exists today on the property with a height exception of 19 meters. So 19 meters for any built form is the permitted height in the zoning bylaw today.
And the setbacks would be, the interior setbacks would be 1.2, so they could go to 19 with 1.2 on either side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, okay, so I just wanted to get a sense of what that massing and setback requirement might be. Okay, great. I think that answers my questions. Anybody have any further questions they want to ask on that before we go to our next speaker? Is there anyone else in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? All right, I'm not seeing anybody else come forward. So, Mr. Edwards, you have 2 minutes to recap on the application.
I think the recap will be just simply that we've made some conscious decisions here with regards to the fact that we acknowledge that there's an R5 next to an R3. And as I mentioned before, not going to 19 meters is a prudent thing to do, in my opinion. We've all agreed on that. What's being pursued is an increase in density in terms of the units requested. And that is also something that we use to maintain the footprint so that we're not expanding the building any further. We're not going up any higher. It's the same volume. The impact to the adjacent properties, when we looked at the placement of that building, we made sure that we were well back from the front because we also wanted to be able to create additional space relative to the adjacent properties on either side. So we averaged that out and we worked with it that way. So there weren't any things that we were deliberately going out of our way to try and exceed what would be what we call reasonable. Unfortunately, based on how things are perceived, reasonable is a very gray zone, and it seems to be different depending on who we speak to. There's been a myriad of emails, I lost count, where we've actually exchanged correspondences. Some of them are actually helpful. We had at least one exchange where we're talking about the staircase on the rear of the building and the fact that we looked at increasing the visibility aspect to be a little bit more compatible by using some screening to the stair. And that was the discussion that was had with one neighbor, and the neighbor felt that that was a good gesture on our part to make sure that we could do that. But in general, there's not much more I could say other than what was already said. So I addressed. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Edwards. So with that, then, I think, like I said, we're reserving. Correct. That's what we're doing. So you will get the decision in due course. And like I always say, it's the requirement under the act is within 10 days, you'll get the written decision. So thank you for your time today, and you'll hear soon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the
All
panel.
right, thank you. All right, I think that brings us to the last application, if I'm keeping track properly. Number 11, 470 Mutual Street, Mr. Ibrahimpour, who I guess is online. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, how are you? It's been
I'm
a long
well.
day for you.
It is a long day for us. So I'm just going to ask you to briefly explain what you are requesting from the panel.
Yes, we requested last time about the 470 Mutual that one of the requirements is a noise study. We don't want an exemption from noise study. We are going to accept that is going to be maintained on the deed of the property. That is noise problem is right there because it's only one property, which is about, I guess, 30 meters from the main road. And for that reason, we decided that we don't want to do it. And one of the main things is that I took over the project after it was built halfway. So I thought, okay, at this point that is all done, I cannot really add on any solar panel, anything else to just add on to the system that it is. And I cannot really increase the basically receiving the noise to the inside the building. So I requested that if it's possible, the committee accept my my request that we just added on to the zoning to on the deeds that yes, we are going to put it in. Anybody want to buy it or rent it or however, they will know, they will be notified That's a problem there. Which on the other cases, we had the same thing. We had the experience that we had the noise study, and after so much time and expenses, it come to the same conclusion. And we have an example that the committee allowed us in the past. And last time, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. And last time, one of the gentlemen on the panel was asking that he couldn't believe me that if I started the building or we just took over. I sent the first contract that the owner had with the company, which I don't want to mention the name. It was that they built halfway and then they come to the conclusion that they had some disagreement and they transferred the contract to me. And the dates and everything is on it.
All right, so I need you to tell me then, Mr. Ibrahimopour, what's been built on the property so far?
Right now, there is 3 townhouses that is built on the property and is at the stage of a drywall.
Is the foundation in?
Oh, yes, foundation is in and framing is completed. Plumbing is done, electrical is done, half of the HVAC is done. All the windows are in, doors are in, just pretty much basement is all done.
Can you tell me when the windows went in, Mr. Ibrahimopour?
Windows were done in month of, I believe, November, if I'm not mistaken. It was not while I was not in charge, so it was done before me. I started with the plumbing.
Okay, so they knew of the condition for a noise study that would have addressed the type of massing, the type of windows, the type of roofing. So they were aware that this was to be done, right?
Yes, they were aware. They were aware, but the thing is that the irony is that the owner is not someone that knows how to build. Is not a builder, has no idea about these things, and they built it for him. He was not in charge of the project. So they built it for him, and when they come to some disagreement over situations, they ask me to intervene and come and take over. And at that point, I saw that, okay, so many things is done, although it's not done in a point that we'll be having any issues. But having said that, we could have some better job to be done.
All right, thank you. Questions from the committee for Mr. Ibrahimopour? Go ahead, Member Decuyer.
Yes.
My question would be actually for city staff. So if the drywall and the windows are already in the building, if we were not to approve this application and they were to have to do the noise studies or anything that can be done from a planning perspective to alleviate, or are we kind of back where we are where there isn't, because we're too far down into the construction process?
Thank you, Madam Lecouillier. So essentially, from our understanding, based off of the building permit records, just the framing is complete according to our records, and staff feel that the most common mitigation measures could still be implemented at the framing stage. I'm not sure about the drywall, though.
I'm just thinking if drywall's up, you can't put any extra soundproofing. Again, I'm not a builder, so.
Let's confirm with Mr. Ibrahimopour. Is the drywall ready?
Yeah, the drywall is half done between the units and other places, and insulation half is done. They are in the middle of the situation, and I gotta just bring up one point that the noise is coming towards the window. Window is one of the most important portion of it. That is all done because there is no wall facing the MacArthur Street. They're all windows. So there is no insulation, no drywall, rather than just maybe a few inches around the windows. There's lots of windows around. And on the back.
Ibrahimopour, just is the envelope done? Is the building envelope done? So
yes.
is siding up? Is that been completed?
Yes, the envelope is completed. Yes.
All right, thank you. Ms. O'Connell, go ahead, please.
Just wanted to follow up and try and provide some clarification.
Yes.
So if the committee chooses to maintain that condition for the noise study, and the noise study requires additional features related to drywall or windows, the owner would have to complete those in order for city staff to clear that condition and in order for the consent to be granted.
Yes, if it has, but usually from my experience, we had 3 noise study done, and right now one of the application that we withdraw today was 191 Granville. That one we ordered the noise study, but just for the new project that we want to build, because the other one, they gave us a permit, we finished, it's already occupied, so it doesn't make any sense to do on that one. But in this case, it's not really going to be required. They are not going to ask us too much to do, rather than making the windows that towards the street make it 3 glaze. Otherwise, nothing else they can do to add on to prevent the noise. And the windows are installed and was installed before me.
So Mr. Ibrahimopour, I've got some experience with noise studies in my former capacity with the airport.
Right.
And massing in the walls is an important component of that as well. That's why I was asking you about the.
Yeah, absolutely, but it's not facing the noise. It's not facing the MacArthur.
That would be for the study to determine where that massing in the walls would need to happen. All right, is there anyone who has any other questions for Mr. Ibrahimopour? No, so Mr. Ibrahimopour, we don't have a public portion to this, obviously, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to recap on your request.
Sure. No, that's the only thing that I was asking, and I wanted to see that if we can save some money and speed up the process, because it's on the process of severance, and we are waiting for that in order to get some funding for the project, because the project is pretty much just going to come to the stall very soon. And I know that it's not your responsibility to fund the project, but the thing is that it's not going to make any changes, even if they add on. It's going to be a big cost of so much money to change the windows from 2 to 3. And I don't know if it comes up to that point or not, but I'm just hypothetically, I'm just saying that if it comes up to that point. And if it was something that I knew, I would just start it from beginning, but I had no idea. And I just started now, just a few months ago, and that's the time that we are going very slow because of the lack of funding on the project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ibrahimopour, and I don't envy your position to be taking on a project like this. So
usually I don't. I just do everything from beginning. I don't do anything halfway. But both the builder and the owner, they come to me. I don't like to take these type of problems.
all right, I totally understand. Okay, so the committee is going to reserve on this, and I'm not sure I'm going to look to the Deputy Secretary Treasurer. Tell us a little bit about how you will be advised of the outcome.
Okay, and if this application is finished, I would like to add something onto it. I would like to see that if I'm not in a position to ask the city what to do, but if you can just ask the city and city staff to add on the condition of the permits, because the problem is that I had several different places that I built, and we come to the end when they come for the severance, because most of the times, if there's only one owner, they don't want to do the severances. They want to keep it, they want to save money, and they want to keep going and renting their properties. But when it comes to severance, one of the conditions comes as a noise study, which noise study is too late at the severance level. It got to be at the building permit process. It's my just input into it. I don't know who got to go after it, but I don't know where I got to go, and I don't have really time for that to fight.
So Mr. Ibrahimopour, that's some of those details are actually in the environmental noise control guideline, I'm guessing, and you're welcome to have a look at it. And if you have comments that you want to make in terms of how you think it might be improved, I'm sure that you would be welcome to submit your comments on it. So,
yeah, thank you.
Ms. O'Connell, do you have something you want to add?
No, Madam Chair, I was just trying to listen to those concerns on behalf of the city, and I do share some of those frustrations, I suppose, with the requirements for noise studies and the timing that it happens. So I'm sympathetic to the applicant in that respect.
All right, thank you for that. And so, Mr. Ibrahimpour, we're just going to go back to our Deputy Secretary Treasurer in order to be able to tell you how you will be notified of our decision.
Sure. Thank you.
Madam Chair, a decision will be issued at the same time as the other decision, so within 10 days.
All right, so it still follows the same process. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so within 10 days, you'll get the committee's decision on your request.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your time today.
Bye-bye.
So unless member Lecuyer, who keeps me in line, tells me otherwise, I believe we're at the end of our agenda. So I think we're done. Business is done for today, and so we're adjourned. Thank you so much. Bye now.